Chapter 1183. Fellow Taoist Shui Yuan, I heard that you have a chaotic water spirit pearl. I, Hao Lingzi, happen to need it to heal my injuries. I hope you can fulfill my wish. Of course, my 10,000 spirit palace will not take your things for free. I have 100 spirit pill here that I can exchange with you. After saying that, Ziling flipped her hand to summon out a milky white medicinal pill. A medicinal aroma wafted out from it. Just inhaling a whiff of the medicinal aroma was enough to make one's cultivation base rise and fall. Clearly, this medicinal pill was a precious treasure. 100 spirit pill? Venerable Shui Yuan's eyes lit up. The 10,000 spirit palace had several kinds of pills that were treasures for cultivation. 10 spirit pill, 100 spirit pill, 1,000 spirit pill, and the legendary 10,000 spirit pill. The 100 spirit pill in Violet Spirit's hand was enough for her cultivation to improve greatly. Exchanging the 100 spirit pill for the chaotic water spirit pearl was indeed fair. Although Venerable Shui Yuan was a little tempted, he still shook his head and refused. Fellow Taoist Violet Spirit, although the 100 spirit pill is good, I can't exchange it with you because I cultivate the 3-origin holy water technique. This chaotic water spirit pearl is comparable to my life. I hope you can understand. How about 2? Violet Spirit frowned and took out another 100 spirit pill. This also caused Yi Xian to slightly raise his eyebrows. It seemed that this little girl, Violet Spirit, was indeed rich. She could casually take out 200 spirit pills. It was likely that she still had countless treasures in her heaven and earth pouch. Fellow Taoist, you misunderstand. It's not that I don't want to exchange it with you, but the chaotic water spirit pearl has already fused with my saint soul. If I take it out by force, it will definitely harm my life. Venerable Shui Yuan refused tactfully. This. Violet Spirit frowned after hearing Venerable Shui Yuan's explanation. It seemed that he really couldn't take out the chaotic water spirit pearl. It seemed that she really couldn't help Yi Xian this time. In that case, we will. Violet Spirit was just about to leave. Since she couldn't exchange it, there was no need for her and Yi Xian to stay. Furthermore, according to Violet Spirit's thoughts, it was merely a chaotic water spirit bead. There were still over 10 of these beads left in the Myriad Miles Sky Palace. As long as she brought Yi Xian back to the Grand Central Territory, she could take one out and give it to Yi Xian. It was only a matter of time. Unfortunately, even though Violet Spirit's idea was good, Yi Xian simply couldn't wait until he reached the Great Central Region to obtain the Water Spirit Pearl. This was because he wanted to cultivate an avatar before heading to the Grand Central Region. This was his true goal, and also a life-saving measure. Without waiting for Violet Spirit to bid farewell and leave, Yi Xian took a step forward and coldly snorted as he shouted, "You injured 2 supreme elders of my 10,000 spirit palace. Don't tell me you don't want to give me an explanation? Little brother, you?" Violet Spirit's expression changed. She never thought that Yi Xian would actually make things difficult for Venerable Water Yuan. In fact, this matter was just a small matter to Violet Spirit, because it was impossible for the 10 great orthodoxies to not have any conflicts before. Basically, they had all been reduced to small matters. This was also the reason why she didn't mention this matter before. 9th Spiritual Son, what is the meaning of this? If it was the divine son of the Immortal Heaven Palace, Venerable Water Yuan wouldn't even dare to let out a fart. However, he wouldn't allow the spiritual son of the Myriad Spirit Sky Palace to humiliate him. What do I mean? Yi Xian smiled sinisterly and said, "It was indeed rash of my 2 grand elders to ask for the water spirit pearl. However, by injuring them, it means that you have no respect for my Myriad Spirit Sky Palace. All lands under the heavens belong to the king. All lands under the heavens belong to the king. My Myriad Spirit Sky Palace is in charge of the 10th Yuan Hui. All orthodoxies must submit to us. Don't you understand this principle?" Yi Xian shouted. Ha ha ha. Venerable Water Yuan laughed maniacally and looked at Yi Xian sinisterly. He said, "You can say this to any orthodoxy, but it definitely doesn't include my Immortal Heaven Palace. My Immortal Heaven Lord has existed since time immemorial. My Immortal Heaven Palace has existed for many Yuan Hui. Even during the dark era of the Heaven-Devouring Devil Palace, the Heaven-Devouring Devil Palace didn't dare to say such arrogant words to my immortal Heaven Palace. How dare you? Yi Xian pretended to be furious. A blood moon rose behind him and struck a great art towards Venerable Water Yuan. However, Venerable Water Yuan was in the Nirvana creation realm. He didn't care about Yi Xian's attack at all. What ninth spiritual son? You are merely in the great Sage King realm. Not to mention my Hall spiritual son, you are still far from being comparable to me. Rumble. The water curtain covered the sky and the holy light of creation. Venerable Water Yuan's 5 fingers reached up to the sky and slapped down on Yi Xian. The whole area turned into a vast ocean and slammed down on Yi Xian violently. How dare you? Violet Spirit's face was cold, and her voice was like a 10,000-year-old glacier. She didn't seem to have done anything. She merely stretched out her jade-like hand, and the whole area collapsed instantly. The water curtain that covered the sky exploded. Barf. Venerable Water Yuan staggered back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Obviously, he couldn't even block a single attack from an extreme Yin Realm master. Well. It seems that your 10,000 Spirit Palace wants to declare war on my immortal Heaven Palace. The corner of Venerable Water Yuan's mouth was stained with blood. Violet Spirit's attack had injured him quite a bit. This also caused him to roar furiously at Yi Xian and the other two. So what if we declare war? Do you really think that my 10,000 Spirit Palace is afraid of your immortal Heaven Palace? Yi Xian added fuel to the fire without any hesitation. Little brother, don't talk nonsense. Violet Spirit hurriedly reprimanded him, because this was no laughing matter. If the two orthodoxies started a war over such a trivial matter, she wouldn't be able to bear the consequences, even if she was the maid of the master of 10,000 Spirit Palace. Sister, you came here in person, and this Venerable Water Yuan didn't give you any face. If what happened today is spread out, you'll be ridiculed by others. They'll even say that our 10,000 Spirit Palace is afraid of the immortal Heaven Palace. How are we going to survive when we return to the Grand Central Territory? Yi Xian secretly transmitted his voice to Violet Spirit. But he's from the immortal Heaven Palace. Violet Spirit hesitated. Clearly, Violet Spirit still had some reservations. If she really went all out, she was afraid that it would cause a conflict between the two orthodoxies. What are you afraid of? Venerable Water Yuan is just a manifestation realm cultivator. Will the immortal Heaven Palace really start a war with my 10,000 Spirit Palace over such a small figure? Even if the immortal Heaven Palace starts a war with my 10,000 Spirit Palace over a manifestation realm cultivator, my 10,000 Spirit Palace is in charge of the 10th Yuan Hui. Under the leadership of the Master of 10,000 Spirit Palace, we can sweep through the entire Grand Central Territory. Why would we be afraid of the immortal Heaven Palace? Yi Xian was glib-tongued and incited Violet Spirit continuously. Violet Spirit was too naive. When she heard Yi Xian's words, her gaze froze. Just as Yi Xian said, why should she back down? The 10,000 Spirit Palace was the leader of the 10th Yuan Hui. The other party was just a manifestation realm cultivator. So what if she killed him? Little brother is right. My 10,000 Spirit Palace has swept through the entire Grand Central Territory. How can we back down today? Violet Spirit's face turned cold. Killing intent flashed across her eyes as she looked at Venerable Water Yuan. What are you trying to do? Venerable Water Yuan was shocked. He could clearly feel Violet Spirit's killing intent. This also made his expression change, and a great sense of fear rose in his heart. He had no chance of survival if he was targeted by a manifestation realm cultivator. If the other party wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as stepping on an ant. Kill him. Yi Xian was definitely an expert in bewitching people, especially a little girl like Violet Spirit, who hadn't experienced much of the world. Go to hell for this lady. Violet Spirit stretched out her jade-like hand. The world around them was collapsing. Venerable Water Yuan screamed in horror, but his entire body was instantly smashed into pieces by Violet Spirit's palm. He turned into a mist of blood and scattered in the air. He did not even have the strength to resist. Hiss! Such a scene made even Yi Xian gasp. He finally saw how terrifying Violet Spirit was. He also saw the terrifying power of the Yin-Yang realm. One strike, just one strike from a Manifestation Realm cultivator, and a second Manifestation Realm cultivator could not even resist. In an instant, not even a trace of his body was left. Yi Xian's heart trembled. This was not a tremble of fear, but a tremble of excitement. He knew that sooner or later, he would catch up to Violet Spirit. He would also have such a terrifying cultivation. Chapter 1184. What a pity, what a pity! Seeing Venerable Water Yuan turn into a bloody mist, Yi Xian felt his heart ache. This was a great supplement, but he couldn't use the Tribulation Transcender technique to devour it. Little brother, here you go. Violet Spirit returned with the Primal Chaos Water Spirit bead in her hand. She tossed it over to Yi Xian. The Hall Master is dead. The disciples of the Undying Hall cried out in horror and fled in all directions. Even the 8 great elders didn't dare to stay. Cut the weeds and dig up the roots, kill them all. Yi Xian's eyes were malicious. He took a step forward and was about to kill all of the disciples of the Undying Branch Hall. He even wanted to charge into the Undying Branch Hall and plunder all of their treasures. Unfortunately, before Yi Xian could make a move, Violet Spirit instantly stopped him. She frowned and said, "Little brother, it's fine if you kill Venerable Water Yuan, but if you destroy the Undying Branch Hall, you absolutely cannot do such a thing." Obviously, killing Venerable Water Yuan was something Violet Spirit could handle, but destroying the orthodoxies of the Undying Hall was definitely not a small matter. It would definitely lead to a disaster. Yi Xian frowned. He wanted to continue to persuade Violet Spirit, but when he saw her frown, he knew he couldn't be too hasty. Big sister is right, I was too impulsive. Yi Xian chuckled. Let's go. Since they had obtained the Chaos Water Spirit bead, there was no need for the two to stay here. Under Violet Spirit's command, the two turned into streaks of light and disappeared. All Spirits Hall. Violet Spirit's face was calm. She shook her head and sighed from time to time. Although she had killed Venerable Water Yuan on impulse, she still regretted it after calming down. Little brother, this kind of thing can't be done in the future. What we did is equivalent to killing people and stealing treasures. Although I can calm this matter down, it will damage our reputation if it spreads to the main hall. Violet Spirit said softly. Little brother is ashamed to have implicated big sister. Yi Xian sighed hypocritically. Looking at Yi Xian's ashamed expression, Violet Spirit felt that her words might have been too harsh. Forget it. It's just a small matter. However, I need to settle this matter first. During this period of time, you can focus on recuperating from your injuries. When I return, we'll return to the Grand Central Region together, instructed Violet Spirit. This little brother obeys. Yi Xian bowed respectfully, his entire person appearing extremely humble. Violet Spirit nodded and gave Yi Xian a few more instructions. Then, she turned into a stream of light and left the All Spirits Palace. Obviously, she was going to settle the matter with Reverend Shui Yuan. Seeing that Zi Ling had disappeared into the distance, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually disappeared. The corners of his mouth curled up in a playful smile, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yi Xian, you've bewitched this girl into trusting you completely. It seems that she'll be of great help to you when you go to the Grand Central Region, Gai Tianyuan said in a timely manner. She's the maid of the All Spirits Palace Lord. Wherever she goes, she'll be the center of attention. There are many things that she can do for me, and I'll have plenty of time to strengthen myself, Yi Xian said with a cold smile. However, it's also thanks to this little girl that I was able to collect the Chaos Elemental beads. Finally, I can cultivate an avatar before I go to the Grand Central Region, Yi Xian said with a smile. Yi Xian, I must remind you that avatars have a slim chance of surviving. Who knows how many peerless geniuses have fallen while cultivating this technique. I hope you'll think twice before you act, advised Gai Tianyuan. If Yi Xian died, Gai Tianyuan would die as well. This was why Gai Tianyuan did not want Yi Xian to cultivate this technique. Unfortunately, Yi Xian turned a deaf ear to Gai Tianyuan's advice. Yi Xian believed that he could cultivate an avatar, and this was extremely important to him. Rumble. The palace doors of the 10,000 Spirit Palace rumbled as they closed. Yi Xian officially entered closed-door cultivation. Before entering closed-door cultivation, he warned everyone in the 10,000 Spirit Palace that no one was allowed to disturb his closed-door cultivation without his permission. Inside the All-Spirits Palace, Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the air, as the primal 5 elements stone floated in front of him. There was also a large amount of heavenly and earthly treasures piled up like a mountain, causing the entire myriad spirit palace to be illuminated in a myriad of colors. If you want to cultivate an avatar, you'll need to use the most powerful flames to melt the chaos elemental beads, and these heavenly treasures to forge an avatar. Gai Tianyuan's voice rang out in Yi Xian's ears. Of course I know. Yi Xian squinted his eyes. The aura around him suddenly surged. The 5-colored flame burned around him. It was the Chaos 5-colored mystic flame that he had refined years ago. Yi Xian did not know what kind of flame could be considered powerful. However, the 5-colored mystic flame produced by the variant Chaos Saint Tribulation was definitely not a problem to forge an avatar. Refine! Yi Xian formed a seal with both hands. The 5-colored mystic flame whizzed out and swallowed the Chaos elemental beads and a large number of heavenly treasures in an instant. Sizzle! Under the intense heat of the 5-colored mystic flame, these heavenly treasures instantly melted into a ball of crystal-clear liquid. However, the 5 spiritual stones did not change. They were still shining brightly under the 5-colored mystic flame. However, Yi Xian was not in a hurry. He knew that the chaos elemental beads were extremely sturdy. According to the introduction of the Avatar secret technique, it would take 100 years to melt the chaos elemental beads. Time passed little by little. In just 30 years, the chaos elemental beads had melted into 5 balls of liquid. It was 70 years earlier than expected. However, Yi Xian was not surprised. After all, the 5-colored mystic flame was extremely powerful. It would definitely be fiercer than other flames. Yi Xian was not surprised that the 5-colored mystic flame could melt the 5 spiritual stones 70 years earlier. Condense. When all the materials had melted into liquid, Yi Xian began to forge a body according to the Avatar secret technique. The process took a long time. It took a total of 500 years for Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian had to be extra careful when forging the avatar. This was because this was his second life. Moreover, he needed this avatar to cultivate the boundless secular technique and the astral origin formula. Naturally, he had to forge this avatar to perfection. Phew! When 500 years had elapsed, Yi Xian slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His tense nerves finally relaxed a little. A body had appeared before him. Sparkling and translucent, multicolored light shone resplendently. A body that was identical to Yi Xian's bloomed with light. This was simply another Yi Xian. Good. Yi Xian's eyebrows twitched. He looked at this avatar body with joy. The excitement on his face was extremely strong. It was obvious that he was very satisfied with this avatar body that he had forged. Kid, forging an avatar body is very simple. However, what comes next is very dangerous. Are you sure you want to continue? Gai Tianyuan asked in a gloomy voice. The avatar body was a great divine ability. It was also a very widespread divine ability. Many great sects had this divine ability. However, the number of people who could cultivate it could be counted on one's fingers. Forging an avatar body was very simple. However, if one wanted to cultivate an avatar body, the nurturing process would be terrifying. Chapter 1185. It was mentioned in the previous article. In order to cultivate an external incarnation, one had to fuse one's heart blood into the external incarnation. More importantly, one had to split a trace of one's soul and fuse it with the external incarnation. This process required 10,000 years. After 10,000 years, the main body and the external incarnation would be connected, and the external incarnation would be cultivated. This process sounded simple, but it was extremely terrifying. One must know that the soul was the foundation of a human. Even if it was just a trace, it could cause one's mind to go crazy. If one's willpower wasn't strong enough, one's soul would definitely explode and die. Therefore, This was also the reason why the external incarnation was so widespread, but very few people were able to cultivate it. After all, no one would joke around with their life. Yi Xian naturally knew the dangers of cultivating an external incarnation. However, he believed that he could succeed. Although he didn't have a shocking aptitude, Yi Xian wouldn't lose to anyone in terms of willpower. Inhale, 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 inhale. Yi Xian constantly adjusted his body. He had to adjust his condition to the peak, because what he was about to face was an extremely difficult task. 10 years later, Yi Xian's essence, energy and spirit were already extremely condensed. A ruthless light flashed across his eyes. Qi. Yi Xian moved. He slit his wrist and frantically urged the heart blood in his body. The bright blood instantly fused with the external incarnation. Buzz! The external incarnation shone brightly. A wave of spiritual aura suddenly appeared, and a trace of vitality gradually grew. Suddenly, Yi Xian let out a low roar. Blue veins rolled on his forehead. His body trembled violently. A trace of weak white light gradually overflowed from his glabella. Yi Xian forcefully split a trace of his soul. The pain from the soul was simply unbearable. Moreover, Yi Xian's mind was in a mess. He only felt that his brain was about to explode. Condense! Yi Xian let out a loud roar. He trembled as he urged the technique. He slowly sent the trace of his soul into the external incarnation. His entire body was groaning in pain. At this moment, Yi Xian's mind was in a trance. He couldn't tell who he was. He was Yi Xian. Was he an avatar? Yi Xian had to maintain his main body and his avatar at the same time. The two minds clashed against each other, and the pain made Yi Xian feel like he was better off dead. Yi Xian hammered the ground with his fists. His avatar did the same. Clearly, the pain Yi Xian was enduring was unimaginable. Yi Xian didn't care about the physical pain, but the pain of his soul being torn apart made him feel as if he was in a life or death situation. Yi Xian was extremely certain that if he could not endure the pain of his soul being split apart, his soul would definitely shatter and die, and he would fall from this world forever. Yi Xian was rolling on the ground in pain. His avatar was in the same state. Because his soul had split, he was controlling two bodies at the moment. He couldn't maintain this state at all. You idiot! Gai Tianyuan roared. Gai Tianyuan roared again and again. His remnant soul was imprisoned within Yi Xian's sea of consciousness. He could completely feel that Yi Xian's sea of consciousness was cracking inch by inch, and the aura of the nirvana force that coiled around him was unstable, as if it was about to explode at any moment. At this moment, Gai Tianyuan was almost scared to death. If Yi Xian's soul were to explode and die, the nirvanic force around him would completely erupt. Gai Tianyuan would also be reduced to ashes. No, he can't hold on. He will definitely die. Gai Tianyuan roared angrily, but there was nothing he could do at this moment. It was too late for Yi Xian to give up now. He had to succeed. Otherwise he would die. At this moment, Gai Tianyuan could only secretly pray that Yi Xian could endure this terrible pain. Otherwise he would be buried with Yi Xian. Refine! Yi Xian roared. He struggled to support himself on the ground with his arms, and sat down cross-legged again. His avatar also climbed up from the ground, and made a series of hand seals. Fortunately, Yi Xian had experienced too many life and death situations. Even though he was suffering from the pain of his soul splitting, he still managed to endure it. He even used his strong willpower to urge his avatar to cultivate. What a terrifying willpower! Gai Tianyuan muttered in shock. He originally thought that Yi Xian wouldn't be able to endure it, but he didn't expect Yi Xian to actually make it through. In fact, the first step of cultivating an avatar was the most difficult. Most people died during this first step. But if someone could endure the pain of the soul splitting during this first step, then they only needed to rely on their strong willpower to have a 50% chance of successfully cultivating an avatar. Why 50%? The reason was very simple. Although one had endured the pain of the soul splitting, it was an extremely difficult process for the body and the avatar to be connected in mind for the next 10,000 years. Most people died because of the soul splitting, and some people cultivated an avatar. But this group of people completely lost themselves and didn't know who they were. According to the mortals, this person was crazy. Only a small group of people survived the 10,000 years and really succeeded in cultivating this great divine sense. Anyone who had cultivated outer body incarnation was not a simple person. They were all top figures in the entire chaotic world. Infinite methods connected in mind. Yi Xian let out a low roar as he quickly formed hand seals. His avatar sat opposite him and also formed hand seals. However, his avatar's eyes didn't open, but the auras of Yi Xian and his avatar were gradually fusing into one. When the avatar opened its eyes, it also meant that Yi Xian had succeeded in cultivating. Time passed by little, 100 years, 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. When 5,000 years had passed, the aura of the avatar was extremely agile. Its eyelids were trembling slightly, as if they were about to open at any time. Amazing, really amazing. I Gai Tianyuan am not as good as him. 5,000 years had passed, and Gai Tianyuan had seen every detail of Yi Xian. His hatred for Yi Xian in his heart had decreased a lot. Instead, he had an indescribable feeling of admiration. To be honest, there were very few people who could make Gai Tianyuan admire. But now he really admired Yi Xian. He admired him so much that he had nothing to say. Even Gai Tianyuan himself didn't dare to say that he could cultivate an external incarnation, because he was well aware of the dangers involved. However, Yi Xian was actually about to succeed in cultivating it. It had only taken him 5,000 years. Good boy, good boy. If you were not an ordinary person, I am sure that you would definitely be the most powerful competitor in the next Yuanying. Gai Tianyuan sighed again and again. What a pity, what a pity. The heavens are jealous of geniuses. The heavens are jealous of geniuses. You have such unparalleled willpower. But the heavens are so unfair that you only have a mortal body. Gai Tianyuan was filled with regret. He was truly praising Yi Xian, but a trace of pity flashed through his eyes. If Yi Xian had a battle physique, even if it was an ordinary battle physique, just by relying on his astonishing willpower, his future would be limitless. Unfortunately, an ordinary person was an ordinary person after all. The maximum limit was the creation and transformation realms. This was the unchanging iron law of the chaotic world. It had never been heard that an ordinary person could enter the yin-yang realm, let alone the more powerful realms after the yin-yang realm. While Gai Tianyuan was lamenting, a thunderous roar came from Yi Xian and his avatar. Condense! Yi Xian suddenly roared, and his eyes suddenly opened. At the same time, his avatar also slowly opened his eyes. A light flashed across his eyes, and a human-like smile appeared on his face. Success! Yi Xian and his avatar spoke at the same time. His avatar slowly stood up, constantly looking around, and looked at Yi Xian's body. Chapter 1186. Me. Which one is me? At this moment, Yi Xian was in an extremely strange state. He was an avatar, but he saw the main body looking at him in confusion. This strange contradiction left him extremely confused. See your nature with a clear heart, and all things are natural. Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was in this strange state, Gai Tianyuan shouted. This shout was like a thunderclap, exploding in Yi Xian's ears. It was also Gai Tianyuan's shout that instantly woke Yi Xian up. Hiss! Yi Xian and his clone sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. They felt an extreme sense of lingering fear in their hearts. Fortunately, Gai Tianyuan had shouted just now. Otherwise, they would have fallen into a muddle-headed state, and might have become a madman. Many thanks. Although Yi Xian had always wanted to kill Gai Tianyuan's shout could be considered a great help. He sincerely expressed his gratitude. However, Yi Xian's thoughts were completely focused on his avatar. Main body. Avatar. Yi Xian and his avatar spoke at the same time. When their eyes met, they felt as if their minds were connected, as if their blood was connected. Ha ha. In the next moment, Yi Xian and his avatar laughed loudly. Yi Xian was still Yi Xian, and his avatar was still Yi Xian. It was just that he had successfully cultivated an avatar. Whether it was his avatar or his main body, they were both Yi Xian himself. However, it had to be said, avatar was indeed a powerful ability. Although both his main body and avatar were Yi Xian, Yi Xian could control two minds at the same time. The profundity of this was not something that could be described with words. Yi Xian, congratulations on your success. Gai Tianyuan sighed. Thank you for your final shout to remind me. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have really woken up, Yi Xian said sincerely. I'm just the icing on the cake. Even without me, you'd still wake up with your willpower, Gai Tianyuan said honestly. However, even though you've successfully cultivated the external incarnation, you still need to regulate your breathing and recover your spirit. That silly girl Violet Spirit has been waiting for you outside for a long time. If she hadn't sensed that you were at a critical juncture in your closed-door cultivation, I'm afraid that girl would have barged in here. Gai Tianyuan reminded. Upon hearing this, Yi Xian nodded slowly. Then he sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. After all, cultivating the external incarnation for 5,000 years had exhausted him. Strangely enough, while Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged in cultivation, his external incarnation was pacing back and forth in the hall, seemingly pondering something. Don't get me wrong, his external incarnation was also Yi Xian. However, after he cultivated this technique, he could multitask. Although his main body was cultivating, his incarnation was also thinking. This was the terrifying aspect of the external incarnation great divine ability. One person could be used as two people. This kind of mysterious technique was indeed very powerful. 10 days later, Yi Xian finally walked out of the 10,000 Spirit Palace. However, he had already put away his external incarnation. Violet Spirit was waiting outside the palace. When she saw Yi Xian come out of his closed-door cultivation, a smile appeared on her face. Little brother, your closed-door cultivation this time made me wait bitterly. It actually took more than 5,000 years, Violet Spirit complained. However, what's up with your cultivation? Why is it still at the Supreme Saint King realm? Have you not recovered from your injuries? In the next moment, Violet Spirit frowned. This was because she could tell that Yi Xian was still at the Supreme Saint King realm. Clearly, in the 5,000 years of closed-door cultivation, Yi Xian had not recovered to the Nine Heavens Saint King realm. However, Yi Xian had already said that his injuries had already recovered, but he still needed some time to recover his former cultivation. Little brother, I've already stayed in the Great Southern Do region for thousands of years, but I still haven't found the inheritance of the Chaos Star Master. Let's return to the Great Central region together, Violet Spirit said. We're going to the Great Central region now. Yi Xian was slightly startled. Violet Spirit was puzzled. Don't tell me you still have something to do? Little brother, I've already dealt with the matter of Venerable Shui Yuan. However, this matter was still caused by you. If you continue to stay in the Great Southern Do region, I'm afraid that you'll have a conflict with the Undying Palace. Violet Spirit frowned. I still have some unfinished business. Why don't you return to the Great Central region first? I'll definitely return in 1,000 years at most, or 100 years at least, Yi Xian said softly. All right. Violet Spirit did not ask why Yi Xian did not leave with her. After all, everyone had their own secrets. She did not want to force him. What happened next was very simple. Violet Spirit left behind many precious pills and returned to the Great Central region. Yi Xian also heaved a sigh of relief when Violet Spirit left. After all, Yi Xian was indeed very irritated to have to call a little girl's sister every day. No matter how thick-skinned he was, he still had a knot in his heart. Now that Violet Spirit had returned to the Great Central region, he could finally be free. Of course, Yi Xian's best choice was to travel with Violet Spirit. However, he still had some unfinished business, so he had to delay it for another 1,000 years. First of all, although Yi Xian had successfully cultivated the external incarnation, he needed it to start cultivating the astral origin art and the boundless secular technique. Second, Yi Xian had yet to establish his own sage monarch world. This was related to his cultivation. Third, he needed to become a Nine Heavens Sage King within 1,000 years. Only by completing these three matters could he truly go to the Great Central region and compete with those so-called spiritual children and divine children. Perhaps he could also meet some old friends in the Great Central region. Yi Xian already knew that Lu Bai was in the heaven-mending sect. However, the whereabouts of Yuan Ling and Luo Ho were unknown. These two people were inextricably linked to him. Moreover, Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen were his subordinates who had been following him. To be honest, Yi Xian was not too worried about Luo Ho and Yuan Ling. Although they were only small saints, they knew the chaotic world very well. However, Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen were different. The two of them were too unfamiliar with the chaotic world. Moreover, their cultivation was the weakest. Yi Xian was also worried that something would happen to the two of them. However, now was not the time to think about these things. Yi Xian knew that the most important thing for him was to strengthen himself. Only when he was truly powerful would he have the opportunity to meet these old friends again. Swoosh! Yi Xian took a step forward and soared into the sky, instantly disappearing from the great palace hall. From now on, he might never return, because this place no longer had any value to him. His future should be in the great central region, not the Nanda border. Miofa Kingdom. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. Lin Miofa and Lin Miofa bowed at the side. However, the two girls looked nervous and did not dare to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian did not look like Yao Yueya. He had returned to his original appearance. The arrival of Yi Xian simply shocked the two girls. One should know that the great palace hall had already spread the news that Yi Xian was dead. However, he actually appeared in front of them alive. How could they not be shocked? I need a place for seclusion, a place that no one knows about, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Chapter 1187. Okay. Lin Miaofa's expression was complicated, but she agreed without hesitation. She didn't ask why Yi Xian was still alive, because she knew what to ask and what not to ask. If she knew too much, she would probably become a dead person. You are very smart, and I like smart people very much. As long as the two of you listen to my orders, I can guarantee that the wondrous spell nation will prosper forever. But if the two of you leak information about me, not only will your souls scatter, but your wondrous spell nation will also vanish, Yi Xian said indifferently. Yi Xian had already planted restrictions on the two women. With the thought their souls would scatter and they would die. That was why he came here. The wondrous spell nation has a huge core. This place was originally used by the founder. Now it seems that it can be used as a place for seclusion, and no one will be able to find your tracks, Lin Miofa said. Okay. Yi Xian nodded slowly. Fire spewed out from the core of the earth. As far as the eye could see, there was a sea of magma. The scorching aura was like a tide, turning the space into a fiery world. The two Yi Xian were sitting cross-legged on a bluestone, staring at each other. Doppelganger. Main body. The two Yi Xian spoke at the same time, and then smiled at each other. This scene was extremely strange, but it also seemed to be reasonable. Astral origin art, boundless secular art. The main body took out two supreme ancient books and placed them in the doppelganger's hand. Don't worry, main body. I will definitely master these two arts, the doppelganger said in a deep voice. Swish, swish. With a flip of his hand, a mountain of heavenly materials and earthly treasures appeared, almost filling up the entire core of the earth. The spiritual energy overflowing from these heavenly materials and earthly treasures directly formed a spiritual energy vortex, which was simply terrifying beyond imagination. These natural treasures were all resources that Yi Xian had plundered madly over the years. The number had reached an unimaginable level. These natural treasures are enough for you to cultivate for 10 million years, the main body said with a smile. You and I are of the same heart and body. Once I master my cultivation technique, you and I will dominate the primal chaos. The clone said in a deep voice. This kind of experience couldn't be shared with others. This was also the terrifying part of cultivating an avatar. His avatar was Yi Xian, and his main body was also Yi Xian. However, the profoundness of these two thoughts was not something an outsider could understand. The 5-colored profound flame and 9-colored divine lightning can help you overcome the chaos holy tribulation. Once you master the first stage of the astral origin mantra, you can completely conceal the aura of your tribulation. The true body spoke in a deep voice as he sent the 5-colored profound flame and 9-colored divine lightning into his clone's body. His doppelganger was just a small saint, so he would definitely have to face the Great Saint Tribulation. According to Yi Xian's guess, his doppelganger would also have to face the Chaos Saint Tribulation. Leaving behind the 5-colored mystic flame and the 9-colored thunderclap, it would be easy for him to face the tribulation. Of course, even without these two things, his doppelganger could still face the tribulation successfully. This was because he was his doppelganger, and his doppelganger was him. He had faced the tribulation before, and now he was only facing it again. However, just in case, Yi Xian still left behind the 5-colored profound flame and the 9-colored thunderclap. From this, it could be seen that Yi Xian was very cautious about this cultivation. Rumble. In the depths of the magma sea, his doppelganger finally began to cultivate the astral origin mantra and the boundless secular world technique. He had officially entered a state of cultivation. It's time to leave. Yi Xian took a step forward and quietly left the Earth's core. Only his doppelganger was cultivating crazily in the magma sea. However, whether it was Yi Xian's main body or his doppelganger, they were both himself. He could also sense the doppelganger's situation at all times. It had to be said that the outer body doppelganger was indeed extremely terrifying. After mastering this mantra, Yi Xian's doppelganger was completely immersed in cultivation. Its speed was incomparable to the previous Yi Xian. After all, the previous Yi Xian had cultivated bit by bit, while his doppelganger had his own consciousness. His understanding of cultivation was incomparable to the past. Although he cultivated the boundless secular world technique and the astral origin mantra at the same time, his doppelganger's cultivation speed was absolutely terrifying. Yi Xian could also concentrate on cultivating the space-time force and the nirvana force. The two could be said to complement each other, greatly increasing his terrifying potential. Yi Xian was very confident that when his doppelganger successfully cultivated the boundless secular world technique and the astral origin mantra, when his main body and doppelganger became one, he would become an unimaginably terrifying existence. Of course, Yi Xian couldn't bring his outer body doppelganger with him, because his original purpose was to let his outer body doppelganger cultivate these two mantras. If he brought his doppelganger with him, it wouldn't benefit Yi Xian at all. After leaving the geocentric flame sea, Yi Xian directly returned to the mystic spell kingdom. Next, he would step into the 9 heavens Saint King realm and establish his own Saint Monarch world. Saint realm. From the little saint to the 9 heavens Saint King realm, all belong to the Saint realm. Only by stepping into the Saint King realm could one establish a Saint Monarch world, and the Saint Monarch world was the strongest offensive method in the Saint realm. But what would Yi Xian's Saint Monarch world be like? Mystic Spell Kingdom's forbidden area. Yi Xian sat cross-legged. An obscure and terrifying fluctuation spread around his body. The surrounding heaven and earth became extremely distorted, and wisps of chaotic airflow spiraled around him. There are strong and weak Saint Monarch worlds. The strong can change heaven and earth and destroy an area. The weak can shatter mountains and split seas and become mediocre. Everyone's potential is different, and the Sage Monarch worlds they open up are also different. Some worlds are filled with yellow sand. Some worlds are filled with endless waves. And there are even world-shocking figures who can open up the outline of a primal chaos universe. Gai Tianyuan indifferently explained the secrets of the Sage Monarch worlds to Yi Xian. Yi Xian listened attentively. He was indeed inferior to Gai Tianyuan on the path of cultivation. Gai Tianyuan had once been an immortal realm existence, so Gai Tianyuan's guidance would bring unimaginable benefits to him. Senior, may I ask what kind of world you cultivate in? Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. The Tianyuan world. It's a world of its own. It can sweep away all enemies and be invincible. Gai Tianyuan's voice was calm, but if one listened carefully, they would discover that his voice contained a hint of arrogance. Yi Xian had never seen the Tianyuan world before, but from Gai Tianyuan's tone, Yi Xian could tell that the Saint Monarch world Gai Tianyuan had created was extremely terrifying. The Saint Monarch world is the foundation of the Great Tao. Only by using it as a foundation can one achieve the Great Tao. The Saint Monarch world is called the Saint Monarch world. The Good Fortune world is called the Good Fortune world. As for the Yin Yang world, it's called the Good Fortune world. As for the Yin Yang world, it's called the Good Fortune world. Of course, those are just general terms. In the end, it's all about perfecting the world you establish. Remember, if your Saint Monarch world is destroyed, it's the same as destroying the foundation of your great Tao. You'll have no fate with the great Tao of primal chaos. You'll also lose the chance to become one of the most powerful existences in history, Gai Tianyuan explained. After a long moment of silence, Yi Xian finally asked, "What kind of world did the God Lord of all spirits establish?" Chapter 1188. Silence. 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 When Yi Xian asked this question, Gai Tianyuan fell completely silent. He didn't answer Yi Xian for a long time. Yi Xian could sense that something was wrong with Gai Tianyuan. Even his soul was trembling slightly, revealing a hint of self-mockery. The world he created is the primal chaos universe. Gai Tianyuan's voice was filled with self-mockery and helplessness. There was also a hint of bitterness in his voice. Clearly, he was not calm at all. It was as if he was reminded of many things that he didn't want to look back on. Gai Tianyuan had suffered very few defeats in his life, but the one that left the deepest impression on him was his defeat at the hands of the Lord of all spirits. There was no suspense in his defeat, and it was a very direct defeat. Facing the terrifying Yi Lingtian, he truly understood what it meant to be powerless. The primal chaos universe? Yi Xian was stunned. Clearly, he was shocked by Gai Tianyuan's words. He didn't notice Gai Tianyuan's dejected and dispirited aura. Yi Lingtian, also known as the Lord of all spirits, no one knows of his past, and no one knows of his background. His appearance broke the peace of the 10th Ian gathering. It can be said that along the way, countless great enemies fell under his feet, all of them becoming piles of bones beneath his feet. That was how he became the most powerful expert of the 10th Ian gathering. And the world he created is the primal chaos universe. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why he can become the strongest of all time. The primal chaos universe. This is already the peak of all worlds that have been created. What other world can compare to the primal chaos universe? Gai Tianyuan said a lot, clearly self-mocking. Yes, how could Gai Tianyuan compete with someone who had created a primal chaos universe? It wasn't just Gai Tianyuan. Didn't all the heroes of ancient times fall at the feet of the Lord of all spirits? Yi Xian fell silent. No one knew what he was thinking. Gai Tianyuan's words had a great impact on him. How could he compare to such a terrifying Lord of all spirits? Looking at Yi Xian's silence, Gai Tianyuan said in a low voice, "Kid, I know you're a very proud person, and your goal is to become the strongest throughout the ages. But you're just a mortal," Gai Tianyuan said. "Your potential is limited, and the Sage Monarch world has nothing to do with cultivation base. It has everything to do with potential. Do you really think you're strong enough to create a primal chaos universe?" He wasn't intentionally attacking Yi Xian. "I understand," Yi Xian calmly said. However, in the next moment, his hands formed a seal as he began to open up his Sage Monarch world. Yi Xian was a person who didn't believe in fate. He never believed in the will of the heavens. He only believed that man could conquer the heavens. Only he knew how many hardships he had experienced along the way. Rumble. Primal chaos light rippled in all directions. Yi Xian constantly circulated his cultivation, and the saint's soul in his sea of consciousness trembled violently. The surrounding world slowly dimmed, and it was obvious that he was gradually opening his Saint Monarch world. Ai, Gai Tianyuan sighed helplessly. Putting aside the fact that he and Yi Xian were enemies, he really did admire Yi Xian's temperament. Unfortunately, everyone's destiny was already set in stone, and there was no way to change it. Open. It was as if chaos and thunder were exploding, as if everything in the world was collapsing. An explosive sound came from Yi Xian's mouth. A powerful and terrifying aura spread out, instantly causing a huge change in the world he was in. Rumble. Heaven and earth darkened, and a foul stench filled the air. Strange images of seas of blood appeared, accompanied by the wailing of ghosts and the wailing of gods. A terrifying world of corpses and seas of blood appeared. Azure sea of blood? Gai Tianyuan murmured. Although he was imprisoned in Yi Xian's spiritual sea, he was still able to see what was happening in the outside world. When he saw Yi Xian's sea of blood, he was shocked awake. AI, just as I thought. Looks like you've committed quite a few massacres. Gai Tianyuan sighed deeply. He was not moved by Yi Xian's world at all, as if he had already expected it. The Azure Sea of Blood was very powerful, but it was still slightly inferior to the worlds created by some terrifying battle constitutions, let alone the chaotic universe created by the Lord of all spirits. Those who could create the Azure Sea of Blood were all known as unparalleled demons, which was more than enough to show how extraordinary Yi Xian was. Unfortunately, the Azure Sea of Blood was very powerful, but its potential was limited. It was no more than an ant in the eyes of some Tongtian great beings. Yi Xian, congratulations on opening up the Azure Blood Sea. To be able to reach this step with the body of a mortal, you can be said to be a world-shaking genius. Gai Tianyuan said sincerely. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer Gai Tianyuan. Instead, he looked around the Azure Sea of Blood solemnly, his eyes filled with reluctance. Am I only capable of creating the Azure Sea of Blood? Said Yi Xian hatefully. He was unwilling to accept that he could only create the Azure Sea of Blood. His goal was to become the strongest of all time, not some unparalleled demon. This is your destiny, boy. You can't fight against it. Gai Tianyuan sighed. What is destiny? Yi Xian sneered. Only I can decide my own destiny. I refuse to believe that I'll be reduced to mediocrity. Break! Yi Xian roared ferociously as his entire body went berserk. He actually erupted with all of his cultivation, and even used the power of his saint soul. He actually wanted to personally destroy the Azure Blood Sea that he had created. You're crazy! Gai Tianyuan roared as he watched the Azure Sea of Blood crumble. He couldn't believe that Yi Xian was so crazy. Was he suicidal? After all, the Sage Monarch world was the foundation of the Great Tao. Everything started from there. Yi Xian was destroying his own foundation. If he did this, his cultivation would drop greatly, and if he did, his soul would scatter. Yi Xian was simply courting death. Stop! Stop! Gai Tianyuan roared in fear. If Yi Xian's soul were to scatter, then he'd be buried with him. Explode! Bang! Yi Xian roared ferociously as the Azure Blood Sea world exploded. Splat! When the Azure Sea of Blood exploded, Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His entire body withered, and he exuded a lethargic aura. Crazy! Are you crazy? Gai Tianyuan roared. He couldn't understand why Yi Xian was doing this. Huff! 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 Yi Xian gasped for breath. His body was drenched in sweat, and his life force was fading away. However, his eyes shone with unprecedented determination. The world I created isn't just the Azure Sea of Blood, Yi Xian roared. I've suffered for so many years to reach this point. It's not just the Azure Sea of Blood. I'm sure the world I create will be even bigger. Chapter 1189. Draw out my saint's soul, sacrifice my bloodline, the boundless chaos, open up the world. Yi Xian roared crazily. He wanted to open up the world again, but this time, his entire body became extremely illusory, as if he was about to transform into the Tao between heaven and earth. Yi Xian didn't believe that his potential was only enough to open up the Azure Bloody Sea world. At this moment, he sacrificed his entire body to force out all his potential. This was a crazy act, and also a desperate act. You're crazy, you little lunatic. Looking at Yi Xian's crazy actions, Gai Tianyuan's fear was unimaginable, because he felt that his soul was about to scatter and die, and the power of nirvanic extermination that imprisoned him seemed to be about to explode at this moment. Rumble! Suddenly, the collapsed Azure world rotated, and the monstrous sea of blood churned violently, gradually turning the entire Azure world into a whirlpool. What's going on? Gai Tianyuan said in a daze. He originally thought that Yi Xian was going to transform into the Tao, but such a strange change actually happened in the Azure world. And Yi Xian didn't die immediately. Open! Bang! Like the first thunderclap in the primal chaos. Like the first ray of light born in the primal chaos. the whirlpool exploded, and the scene that appeared next simply stunned Gai Tianyuan on the spot. The beginning of the first yuan, the birth of the primal chaos. Bang bang bang. Like ancient stars rotating, like the universe shaking, a total of 12 whirlpools were born, instantly covering this part of the world. The 12 chaotic whirlpools were like 12 ancient stars revolving around Yixian, and the chaotic airflow that filled the air made Yixian look extremely mysterious, and an indescribable mysterious fluctuation was growing on Yixian's body. It was as if the ancient heavens were high and mighty, as if the primal chaos was silent. At this moment, Yixian looked so unreachable that it gave people a feeling of worship. This is the star world. Gai Tianyuan observed the 12 chaotic whirlpools, and a trembling voice came from his mouth. But in the next moment, he denied his own judgment. This was because he had seen the stellar world before. And the stellar world did not look like this. But if what Yixian created was not the astral world, then what were the 12 mysterious energy spheres that surrounded him? Gai Tianyuan dared to say that he was very knowledgeable, and there was no Sage King's world in the chaotic world that he did not know. However, he was very sure that he had never seen the world created by Yixian, nor had he ever heard of a world with 12 mysterious airflows. Gai Tianyuan was no longer in the mood to think about how Yixian had managed to establish another sage monarch world. He focused all of his attention on the 12 mysterious vortexes, carefully observing them. How is that possible? How is this possible? After a full 10 breaths of time, a loud roar came from Gai Tianyuan's mouth. A strand of his remnant soul was trembling in fear. If he wasn't trapped in Yixian's sea of consciousness, he would have been paralyzed with fear. What did Gai Tianyuan see? The chaotic 12 elements? It's actually the chaos 12 elements? How is that possible? Gai Tianyuan roared with a trembling voice. He couldn't believe what he had seen. 12 vortexes of chaos swirled in the air, each of them representing a different chaos verse. Every single one of them was filled with completely different auras. It was common knowledge that there were 12 elements in the chaotic universe, and this was the 10th one. The 12 chaotic vortexes around Yixian were actually the outlines of 12 chaotic universes. In other words, each chaotic vortex represented a chaotic universe. How could Gai Tianyuan not be shocked when he saw such a shocking thing? Impossible. How is this possible? The Lord of all spirits has only established one chaotic universe. How could he have established 12 chaotic universes? He's just a mortal. Gai Tianyuan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe such a ridiculous thing. Rumble. While Gai Tianyuan was in an indescribable state of shock, the 12 chaotic vortexes around Yixian spun wildly, and Yixian's cultivation rose at a terrifying rate. Break. Yixian abruptly opened his eyes. The 12 vortexes of primal chaos dissipated with a loud bang, and the world suddenly regained its clarity. However, at this moment, Yixian's cultivation suddenly broke through to the 9 heavens Saint King realm. At the same time, in the distant depths of the chaotic universe, an ancient palace stood majestically, and a chaos figure was sighing to the heavens. The chaos was born in the beginning of the first prime. The legendary figure has finally appeared. It seems that the chaotic universe is about to change greatly. Though I am the Lord of Chaos, how should I face this person? He let out a long sigh, then quietly turned around and left the palace, which then vanished into the depths of the chaos verse. What was destiny? This was a profound topic that no one could answer. However, there was one person who claimed to be in charge of destiny. He was the Lord of Destiny, a truly terrifying existence in the chaotic universe. Destiny is unchangeable and irreversible. This is the great way of destiny, and also the truth of the chaos. Although you are not in my control, I cannot tolerate the appearance of an alien like you. A ray of 9-colored divine light walked in the chaotic universe, and an indifferent voice came from his mouth, quietly echoing in the starry universe. Time and space changed, and all things fell into oblivion. The stooped figure was looking up at the long river of time. His appearance was unreal, but it gave people a sense of loneliness and desolation. Time is like water, and what should come will eventually come. In the tide of time, Maybe you and I can meet. All things fall into oblivion. Chaos is annihilated, the cycle repeats, and the chaos changes? A dark figure stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the chaotic world from the edge of the chaotic universe. Although he did not erupt with a terrifying aura, the surrounding starry sky had been turned into a vacuum by the power of annihilation. It seems that the mystery of chaos samsara will appear in the 10th prime. I should prepare early. The figure of annihilation whispered coldly. Karma engenders each other, and there are many implications. Will the battle of the strongest really start in the 10th prime? Under a divine tree of karma, a woman sat cross-legged. Her body was filled with the power of karma, and she was murmuring softly. But it is only the 10th prime, and there are still 2 strongest who have not appeared. What happened? The woman sighed. Even though she was in strongest, she could not deduce the root cause. At the same time, the remaining 5 strongest places exclaimed. In the depths of the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, the Lord of all spirits frowned, and no one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 1190. Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air. He'd just opened up the primal chaos 12 Yuanhui world, causing him to feel extremely tired, as if his entire body had been hollowed out. You. Gai Tianyuan stammered several times in a row, his entire body in a state of extreme panic. Even now he still couldn't believe what he'd just seen. What's wrong with you? Yi Xian frowned slightly. He could clearly sense Gai Tianyuan's trembling presence. Although he knew that it might have something to do with the world he'd created, he didn't know much about the 12 chaotic vortexes. Nor did he know what kind of world he'd created. The Chaos 12 periods. You've created the Chaos 12 periods. Gai Tianyuan blurted out in panic. He wanted nothing more than to throw Yi Xian's body aside and see just what kind of existence Yi Xian was. The Chaos 12 periods? Yi Xian was startled, and he exclaimed in surprise. That's right, the Chaos 12 periods. It also represents the Chaos 12 periods. Do you know what kind of terrifying opportunities lie within? Gai Tianyuan roared in a trembling voice. Back then, the Lord of all spirits had created a chaos universe. But in the future, he'd become one of the strongest of all time. Yet you've created the Chaos 12 periods. This is simply a fantasy, Gai Tianyuan explained in a trembling voice. Yi Xian's eyes lit up when he heard Gai Tianyuan's words. A surge of excitement welled up in his heart, but he didn't show it. So you're saying that my potential is greater than the Lord of all spirits? Yi Xian asked the question on his mind, his heart filled with excitement. Of course. Gai Tianyuan was resolute and decisive. However, he hesitated for a moment before continuing. But there's something that puzzles me. Your potential is simply unprecedented. If there's anyone who can match your potential, it would only be the legendary Chaos Spirit body. But you only have a mortal body, not a Chaos Spirit body. So how did you create such a terrifying world? Gai Tianyuan's mind was filled with doubts. He couldn't figure out what was going on. One had to know that everyone opened up a different world. The stronger the world opened up, the greater the potential of that person. However, there was an unwritten rule in the chaotic world. A mortal body could only cultivate up to the 3rd stage of the creation realm. It was impossible for them to step into the yin-yang realm. This was an unchanging rule. However, Yi Xian had created the 12 Chaos Yuanhui worlds with his mortal body. This was extremely contradictory to his mortal body. What a pity, what a pity. Even though you've created the 12 chaos periods, you just have to have a mortal body. Even if you have endless potential, you'll have to stop at the 3rd level of creation. Gai Tianyuan sighed. At this moment, Yi Xian frowned and asked in a low voice, why do you keep saying that a mortal body can only cultivate to the 3rd stage of the creation realm? What is the secret behind this? Yi Xian had always wanted to know the answer to this question, but no one had told him. Today, taking advantage of this opportunity, Yi Xian naturally wanted to know the answer. After all, this was related to his future path. The so-called mortal body is just a general statement. In fact, the root of it is the soul. Your soul is ordinary and can't resonate with the law of chaos. This kind of person is called a mortal body. The reason why the body is powerful is not because of the physique, but the soul. Because the soul of the body is innately powerful and contains endless mysteries. It can achieve a great resonance with the law of chaos. Whether in cultivation or in battle, it can erupt with terrible power. If you want to step into the yin-yang realm, you must be one with the law of chaos. But your soul can't resonate with the law of chaos, which is the so-called mortal body. Naturally, you can't step into the yin-yang realm. The maximum limit is the 3 stages of creation. This is the unwritten rule of the chaotic world. I've never heard of a mortal body that can break this shackle. Maybe you don't understand what I'm saying, but you should be able to see from my body that I have the Tianyuan battle body. Now, only a remnant of my soul is left. My physical body has long been destroyed by the Lord of all spirits. But as long as my soul is still there, as long as I can find a suitable physical body, I can still transform into the Tianyuan battle body. This is because my soul can resonate with the law of chaos. This is the strength of the body. Gai Tianyuan spoke tirelessly. He spoke a lot, and even explained the difference between a battle body and a mortal body to Yi Xian. Of course, even if the Panga clan specializes in the physical body, their souls are extremely powerful. Because the soul is the core of every cultivator. There is a saying that the soul is scattered and the body is destroyed. Gai Tianyuan said. I see. Yi Xian nodded slowly. At this moment, he also thought of a person, and this person was Lu Bai. Back in the mortal world, Lu Bai was just a mortal. The mortal world was in the Dharma ending age, and there was no spiritual qi left in the world. However, Lu Bai had created a path of cultivation that allowed people to cultivate even if there was no spiritual qi. Moreover, Lu Bai had once used his mortal body to create the inverse immortal formation that even immortals feared. This was because his soul was different. Otherwise, how could Lu Bai's talent be so terrifying? A person's soul was innate, and no external force could change it. This was the difference between the body and the mortal body. Only now did Yi Xian fully understand. That's why I'm very curious. Your potential is so terrifying, but you're just a mortal. This is an extremely contradictory thing that I can't imagine. Gai Tianyuan murmured doubtfully. Is it possible that I have some kind of hidden body? Yi Xian was naturally unwilling to accept that he was just a mortal. This was why he probed. After all, Gai Tianyuan was an experienced and knowledgeable old man. Perhaps he could see something. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Gai Tianyuan slowly shook his head and sighed. I've suspected this before. I even guessed that you might be the legendary hidden spirit body. But in the end, you're just a mortal. I can't be wrong. What's the hidden spirit body? Yi Xian's eyes moved. The hidden spirit body is a legendary body. Although it's not as good as the chaotic spirit body, it's comparable to the 12 strongest body constitutions, or even better. The most terrifying thing about the hidden spirit body is that although it looks like a mortal body, it can coincidentally turn into one of the 12 strongest body constitutions at a certain time. It can also merge 2 strongest body constitutions into one. Gai Tianyuan revealed some secrets of the body to Yi Xian. 2 strongest bodies in one? Yi Xian was stunned. He felt that the hidden spirit body was very similar to his situation at the moment. Chapter 1191. One had to know that Yi Xian had cultivated 2 supreme powers, and was fortunate enough to be a hidden spirit body. Yi Xian had great expectations in his heart. Who has a hidden spirit body in the chaotic world? Yi Xian asked. Gai Tianyuan seemed to have guessed Yi Xian's true thoughts. He sighed slightly and said, Don't think too much. Although you have cultivated 2 supreme powers, you are definitely not a hidden spirit body. This is because although a hidden spirit body looks like a mortal body, its soul is surrounded by spiritual qi. I have always been in your sea of consciousness while your soul is ordinary. You are not a hidden spirit body at all. Gai Tianyuan paused for a moment before continuing. However, legend has it that a hidden spirit body was born in the last Yuan Hui. Legend has it that this terrifying hidden spirit body turned into the heaven-devouring devil body, and wanted to recreate the path of the heaven-devouring devil master in the 7th Yuan Hui. Unfortunately, it was still killed by the 9th Yuan Hui's strongest. In the end, it became a pile of bones beneath the feet of the ninth Yuanhui's strongest. The ninth Yuanhui's strongest? The seventh Yuanhui's heaven-devouring devil master? Yi Xian said in a daze. He didn't know much about the 10 strongest, and had only heard of the nicknames of a few of them. At this moment, he was naturally extremely curious about these 10 strongest. I will tell you about these 10 strongest, so that you can be more prepared when you go to the central domain. Also, don't become enemies with the orthodoxies established by these 10 strongest. Gai Tianyuan said in a deep voice. Chaotic Universe, 12 Yuanhui. First Yuanhui, Master of Chaos. Second Yuanhui, Master of Destiny. Third Yuanhui, Master of Time and Space. Fourth Yuanhui, Master of Undying Heaven. Fifth Yuanhui, Master of Human Tao. Sixth Yuanhui, Master of Destruction. Seventh Yuanhui, Heaven-Devouring Devil Master. Eighth Yuanhui, Master of Extreme Love. Ninth Yuanhui, Master of Extreme Devil Master. 10th Yuanhui, Master of All Spirits. Suppressing the ages, the most powerful in the primal chaos. These were the most powerful in the 10 great Yuans. They dominated the world, suppressing the primal chaos. They were supreme characters, revered by all creatures in the primal chaos. Of course, there were people who had doubts about who would be stronger if these 10 strongest existences were to fight. Unfortunately, no one knew the answer, because no one had ever seen a battle between the strongest of the ages. Naturally, no one knew who was stronger. However, there was a common consensus among all creatures in the primordial chaos, and that was that the earlier the strongest of all time appeared, the stronger they would be. Let's use a simple analogy. When the Chaos Verse was born, the Lord of Primal Chaos of the first epoch was born. He was the first autarch of all time, and he was in control of the power of primordial chaos. He was definitely known as the #1 figure in all of the Chaosverse history. The 10 greatest powers were also ranked because of this. The power of chaos, the power of destiny, the power of spacetime, and so on. Of course, this was only the knowledge of the chaotic creatures. No one dared to say which of the 10 strongest of the Eons was stronger. After all, the level of the strongest of the Eons wasn't something anyone could imagine. Right now it was the 10th Yuanhui. The Lord of all spirits, Yiling Tian, had already achieved the Great Tao and became the most powerful expert of the 10th Yuanhui. The Lord of all spirits also ruled the 10th Yuanhui. However, there were still 2 more eternal paragons that hadn't appeared yet. They would have to wait until the 11th and 12th Yuans. This also formed the Chaotic Universe's 12 Yuanhui, which was also the saying of the Chaotic Universe's 12 Yuanhui. As Gai Tianyuan slowly explained, Yi Xian's eyes gradually lit up. He finally had some understanding of the 10 greatest existences. Not only were there the 10 greatest existences, but there were also 9 Chaos Star Masters. However, these 9 Chaos Star Masters weren't very famous, and were rarely known by the chaotic creatures. Of course, the inheritance of the Chaos Star Master of the 10th Yuanhui had already been obtained by Yi Xian. At this moment his clone was cultivating it. Kid, although it's the 10th Yuanhui ruled by the Lord of all spirits now, you've obtained the inheritance of the Chaos Star Master. As long as you act carefully, you can also become a Chaos Star Master in the end. Chaos Star Masters don't have any requirements for a mortal body. This can be considered your greatest opportunity, Gai Tianyuan said. Chaos Star Master? Yi Xian slowly shook his head. Indeed, Chaos Star Masters were very powerful, and could almost stand shoulder to shoulder with the Eternal Paragons. However, that was only almost. This meant that Chaos Star Masters weren't as strong as the Eternal Paragons. Yi Xian was a proud person. He wouldn't allow himself to be inferior to others. He wanted to become a Chaos Star Master. But he also wanted to become an Eternal Paragon. This was his true intention. If I don't become an Eternal Paragon, I won't be satisfied even if I die, Yi Xian said coldly. You're too ambitious, but you should know that although you've created the 12 primal chaos periods, your mortal body is still a mortal body. You can't even step into the yin-yang realm, so how are you going to compete for the next period's title? Gai Tianyuan scolded. Ever since he became more familiar with Yi Xian, Gai Tianyuan admired Yi Xian more and more. However, the cruel reality was that Yi Xian didn't have the qualifications to compete for the next Yuan Hui's position. So what if I have a mortal body? There's nothing absolute in this world. I'll definitely find a way to break into the Yin-Yang realm. Yi Xian was resolute and decisive. His eyes were filled with determination, because he was never someone who would admit defeat. Furthermore, you're wrong. I've never thought of competing for the 11th Yuan Hui's position. That's because it's too long. So long that I can't wait. I want the 10th Yuan Hui's position. That's my true goal, Yi Xian said arrogantly. What? You want the 10th Yuan Hui's position? Have you cultivated until you've gone stupid? Hearing Yi Xian's ridiculous words, Gai Tianyuan cried out in shock. He simply couldn't believe his ears and loudly berated Yi Xian. He was simply shocked by Yi Xian's crazy thoughts. Can't I? Yi Xian said gloomily. Have you gone mad? Gai Tianyuan roared. The Lord of all spirits has already achieved the Grand Tao and became the 10th Yuan Hui's strongest. How can you become the 10th Yuan Hui's strongest? You're really ignorant. No wonder you're Yi Lingtian's stepping stone. Yi Xian sneered and said. Who said that Yi Lingtian will become the strongest of all time? And I, Yi Xian, won't be able to become the strongest of all time in the 10th Yuan gathering. Who said that? This is the law of chaos. No one can break it because the Grand Tao of chaos only allows for one Yuan Hui's strongest. Gai Tianyuan angrily refuted. Then if I kill the Lord of all spirits, Yi Lingtian, then wouldn't the seat of the strongest of all times be empty? And I can become the new strongest of all times? Yi Xian muttered sinisterly. You? Gai Tianyuan was completely stunned by Yi Xian's bold words. He was completely shocked by Yi Xian's words. Ignorant, stupid, incorrigible. After a full 10 breaths of time, Gai Tianyuan loudly berated. It could be said that he was greatly disappointed in Yi Xian. Incorrigible? Yi Xian sneered. How do you know if you haven't done it? If I can kill Yi Lingtian, I can replace him. You? Gai Tianyuan was already shocked by Yi Xian's crazy thoughts. At this moment, he was completely speechless. However, his heart was in turmoil. Although he didn't approve of Yi Xian's thoughts, it gave him an indescribable feeling. That's right, if the Lord of all spirits died, then the seat of the strongest in the 10th origin gathering would be empty. This wasn't a fantasy, it was indeed a possibility. However, it was only a possibility. After all, this had never happened from the 1st to the 10th Yuan Hui. Everyone knew that the strongest was invincible in the primal chaos. If someone could really kill the strongest of all, then his so-called strongest seat would be nothing more than a title. However, such a person couldn't possibly exist. You really are a lunatic. However, your crazy idea is just wishful thinking. I advise you to focus on cultivating the primal chaos Star Master's inheritance. This is your only way out. Gai Tianyuan gradually calmed down and advised Yi Xian. Wishful thinking? Yi Xian had a playful look on his face. He didn't refute Gai Tianyuan again, because Yi Xian couldn't be bothered to argue with him. As for whether it was wishful thinking or not, he would let Gai Tianyuan know in the future that arguing with him now was meaningless. However, Yi Xian also knew that it was too early to consider these things. He first had to strengthen his cultivation step by step. Only then could he carry out his crazy and bold plan. Chapter 1192. Gai Tianyuan couldn't understand Yi Xian's stubbornness. Yi Xian wasn't a boastful person, but Yi Xian's creation of the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world had truly shocked Gai Tianyuan. Can you show me the world you created? Gai Tianyuan asked in a deep voice. Rumble. 12 chaotic vortexes appeared once again and began to revolve around Yi Xian. The power of the primordial heavens erupted and caused the world around him to collapse. It really is the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world. Even though it's just been created, its aura is already frightening. If your cultivation deepens and completes the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world, I'm afraid you'll be able to kill many powerful enemies with this aura alone. Gai Tianyuan gave a very high evaluation and was extremely envious of Yi Xian. If he had created the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world back then, the Lord of all spirits would have been trampled under his feet. How would he have ended up like this? Unfortunately, Gai Tianyuan knew that it was just wishful thinking, because he didn't have Yi Xian's potential. He also felt sorry for Yi Xian. The heavens were so unfair that Yi Xian was only a mortal. Kid, I have to remind you of one thing. Unless you're in a life-or-death situation, you must never reveal the world you created. If others know that you created the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world, you'll definitely be killed, Gai Tianyuan said solemnly. Of course I know. Yi Xian nodded slowly. Even if Gai Tianyuan didn't remind him, he knew that the world he created was a great taboo. If others knew about it, he wouldn't have a good ending. Now that everything is done and I've stepped into the realm of a 9-heaven Saint King, it's time for me to head to the Central Territory, Yi Xian murmured. Go. Perhaps you'll find a way to break the curse of the mortal body there. As long as you can break the curse of the mortal body, not being able to step into the Yin-Yang realm, and the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world, you'll definitely become the strongest in the next Yuanhui, Gai Tianyuan said firmly. In the 5 regions of chaos, the center was the most important. This was a world where a myriad of Daos competed for supremacy. This was an extremely dazzling and prosperous world. In the boundless river of time, countless extraordinary figures had left behind a deep stroke in the Central Territory. Great sects fought for supremacy. Geniuses soared through the skies. Almighty experts turned the heavens and the earth upside down. And undying experts turned the galaxies upside down. There were countless opportunities here, as well as supreme primal chaos techniques. Be it chaos treasures or rare treasures of heaven and earth, the Grand Central Domain was a paradise for cultivators. However, this heaven was very cruel. Only the strong could survive here, and only the strong could obtain what they wanted. 1. Universe Reversal Starry Sky Teleportation. A heavenly gate opened in the void, and an ancient war chariot rumbled out. 4 peerless beauties accompanied the chariot on both sides, and a coachman was driving the ancient war chariot forward. The bamboo curtains and jade-green jade were ticking loudly. In the ancient war chariot, there was a person sitting cross-legged. This person was Yi Xian, who had come to the Grand Central Domain. However, his current appearance was that of Yao Yuyi. As the 9th spirit son, Yi Xian would no longer exist in this world. This was Yi Xian's plan, and he was proceeding according to this plan. As the 9th spirit son, the most direct symbol of Yao Yuyi was the 4 peerless beauties beside him, as well as the coachman driving him. Since he wanted to become the 9th spirit son, Yi Xian naturally couldn't lack these things. The 4 peerless beauties and the coachman had been staying in the Myriad Spirit Palace in the Grand Southern Do region. When Yi Xian set off for the Grand Central Domain, he naturally had to bring them along. After all, he was now the 9th spirit son. If he returned alone, it would be somewhat inexcusable. Spirit son, Stardo City is just ahead. There is a teleportation formation that can lead directly to the Myriad Spirit Palace. The coachman urged the ancient war chariot forward, while asking for instructions from Yi Xian. Okay. Yi Xian nodded slightly. The ancient war chariot rolled forward, heading towards the majestic heavenly city in front of them. The chaotic universe was boundless. The Grand Southern Do region was very far away from the Grand Central Domain. With the ancient war chariot's speed, it might not be able to reach the Grand Central Domain, even if it traveled for tens of thousands of years. Of course, this was only because Yi Xian's cultivation was not enough. If it was an immortal realm expert, the starry sky teleportation would only take an instant. However, although Yi Xian's cultivation was not at the level of starry sky teleportation, the 5 domains of chaos had interdomain teleportation formations. Yi Xian also relied on this formation to reach the Grand Central Domain. Stardo City. This was an ordinary city in the Grand Central Domain. The 4 walls were tens of thousands of feet high. A river that was tens of thousands of feet wide surged outside the city. Some strange beasts could be seen flitting across the sky from time to time. Although Stardo City was just an ordinary city, and was insignificant in the entire Grand Central Domain, there was a teleportation formation in the city. It was also a place where cultivators came and went. After arriving at the Grand Central Domain, Yi Xian, as the 9th spirit son, naturally had to return to the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. In order to go there, he had to use the teleportation formation. Otherwise, it would take thousands of years just to travel. After all, the Grand Central Domain was vast and boundless. It was not something the other 5 domains could compare to. It was like the East, South, West, and North domains were just lakes, while the Grand Central Domain was a vast ocean. It was also the true core of the chaotic world. In front of Stardew City's gate, there was an endless stream of cultivators coming and going. Some of them flew in the sky, some came on clouds, and some came on strange beasts. However, no matter who it was, they would all descend from the sky and walk into Stardew City. There was an unwritten rule in the Grand Central Domain. Anyone who entered the city had to be inspected by the city guards before entering. After all, if there were bloodthirsty demons sneaking into the city, there would definitely be a bloody massacre. The people guarding every city were all disciples of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. This also proved that the 10th Yuan Hui was controlled by the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Rumble. Fierce beasts roared, and war chariots rumbled. When Yi Xian's ancient war chariot arrived in the sky, the gate of Stardew City was in chaos. A large number of cultivators stepped aside and looked at Yi Xian's ancient war chariot with reverence. Greetings, Ninth Spirit Son. As soon as Yi Xian's war chariot landed, 4 city guards bowed. Everyone's face was filled with fear and trepidation. No need for formalities, Yi Xian said indifferently. Although he had never been to the Grand Central Domain, he had interrogated Yao Yueya about the Grand Central Domain before. He naturally knew about these formalities. The 12 spirit sons of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace were extremely noble. Even Creation Realm cultivators had to be in fear and trepidation, because it was very likely that one of them would become the strongest in the next Yuan Hui. Even if the 12 spirit sons couldn't become the strongest in the history, they would definitely be important figures in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace in the future. These disciples guarding the city gate naturally didn't dare to be negligent. Spirit Son, please enter the city. The 4 guards moved aside and acted extremely humble. The coachman drove the ancient war chariot into Stardew City. Chapter 1193. Yi Xian's arrival immediately alarmed the Star City Lord. In just the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, the Star City Lord led a large number of people to welcome Yi Xian. After all, the Star City Lord did not dare to be negligent with the arrival of the spiritual sun. In front of the City Lord's mansion, 4 maids opened the bamboo curtain for Yi Xian, and Yi Xian slowly walked out from the 10,000 spirit carriage with a refined smile on his face. His demeanor and aura were exactly the same as Yao Yueya's, and it was impossible to tell if he was real or fake. The Star City Lord, Zhang Xiling, greets the 9th spiritual son. The Star City Lord was a great Saint King, and when he saw Yi Xian, he was extremely fearful and respectful. He led the people behind him and bowed to Yi Xian, not daring to look directly at Yi Xian. Everyone, please dispense with the formalities. Yi Xian lightly smiled. It was a good interpretation of what it meant to be refined and refined. It gave off a gentle aura like the spring wind and rain. Yao Yueya had always been a refined and courteous person in front of others, and he seemed to be very kind. Even in front of a mortal, he wouldn't put on a high and mighty attitude. This was his usual style of doing things. Haha, I was wondering who had arrived at Star City. So it's you, elder brother? Suddenly, a loud laugh came from the City Lord's mansion. A young man in golden robes walked out slowly, and 2 sword boys followed behind him. The man had blonde hair and blue eyes. His hair looked like it was made of gold as it cascaded down his back. His eyes were like sapphires, but when they opened and closed, they gave off a sharp aura. He was actually a 9 Heaven Saint King. The 2 sword boys following behind him held 2 wooden boxes in their hands. Although the wooden boxes were not opened, a faintly discernible sword intent seeped out from the wooden boxes. Obviously, the 2 wooden boxes contained extremely impressive weapons. They should be the golden-haired young man's weapons. Elder brother, what's with that look? You were only sent to the Great Southern Domain. Don't you recognize me now? The golden-haired young man sneered. The 10th spiritual son, Tuobatian? Yi Xian said indifferently. Yi Xian did not recognize this person. But he had done his homework before coming to the great central domain. He even knew some people from Yao Yui's mouth. This golden-haired young man was the 10th spiritual son, Tuoba Tian. His cultivation method was called Heavenly Sword 9 Songs, and he was ranked after Yao Yui's of Heavenly Sword. However, even though Tuoba Tian was calling Yao Yuya elder brother, the two of them had a huge grudge against each other. That was why he was ranked Yao was of course. He was to twos of heaven. Of course was of course, and he of the and of course is of heavens. Looks like you've become a fool after your trip to the great southern Do domain. Not only did your cultivation not improve, but you're also not as bright as before. I thought you died in the great southern Do domain. Tuoba Tian sneered. The Star City Lord and the others kept quiet out of fear. They did not dare to interrupt. After all, this was a competition between spiritual sons. Yi Xian had a warm smile on his face from beginning to end. He was not angered by Tuoba Tian's provocation, because that was Yao Yui's style. Yao Yuya would pretend to be magnanimous, even when faced with others' ridicule. He would not get into a conflict with others. Among the 12 spiritual sons, Yao Yuya was famous for being a good person. However, those who knew Yao Yuya knew that he was a very shrewd person. His methods were sinister and despicable, and he did not have any friends among the 12 spiritual sons. Tuoba Tian naturally knew of Yao Yuya's sinister face. He was not afraid that Yao Yuya would fall out with him. Logically speaking, since Yi Xian had become the 9th spiritual son, he should act like Yao Yuya and ignore Tuoba Tian's ridicule. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not Yao Yuya, and he was not prepared to act like Yao Yuya. The reason was simple. Yi Xian had become the 9th spiritual son to avoid some trouble for himself, so that he would have enough time and cultivation resources to become stronger. However, this did not mean that he would be like Yao Yuya and endure, because that was not his style. Domineering, unreasonable, vicious and merciless. If you look at me one more time, I'll kill your entire family. This was Yi Xian's style of doing things, and this style had to be displayed bit by bit. Right now Tuoba Tian was the beginning of his style. Don't worry, even if your mother dies I won't die. When you have time, go and collect your mother's corpse. The smile on Yi Xian's face disappeared, and his words were extremely vicious. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. When Yi Xian's words entered his ears, Tuoba Tian was stunned. He could not believe what he had just heard. If the person standing in front of him was not Yao Yuya, he would have thought that someone had turned into Yao Yuya and insulted him. What did you say? Tuoba Tian's face was ashen, and veins bulged on his forehead. An extremely terrifying evil aura burst out, and a terrifying killing intent flashed across his eyes as he looked at Yi Xian. You didn't hear me clearly? Yi Xian said with a sinister smile. I remember that your mother was the city lord of Peerless City. Back then, in order to let you enter the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, she seduced Elder Yuan Tian, which allowed you to become a disciple of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. However, Elder Yuan Tian was indeed ruthless. He used your mother as a cultivation vessel, and almost took half of her life. However, it was worth it. After all, you did not disappoint, and became the 10th spiritual son. With your current status, I believe that Elder Yuan Tian will let your mother live, right? Wah! When Yi Xian finished speaking, Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood. His face had already turned purple, and he looked extremely ferocious. An extremely terrifying killing intent burst out, and his eyes were as red as blood as he looked at Yi Xian. Tuoba Tian's heart was about to explode from anger. He was in a state of extreme humiliation, because what Yi Xian had said was the greatest humiliation of his life. This secret was known to everyone, but ever since Tuoba Tian became the 10th spiritual son, no one dared to speak of it. However, this was Tuoba Tian's greatest humiliation. Yet today, Yi Xian had bloody unraveled Tuoba Tian's scars. How could Tuoba Tian not feel ashamed and resentful? He wished for nothing more than to grind Yi Xian's bones to dust. Yao Yuya, you've gone too far. I'll take your life. Clang clang clang. At this moment, Tuoba Tian was extremely furious. The wooden boxes in the hands of the two sword boys exploded with clanging sounds. Following an explosion, two killing swords soared into the sky. Heavenly Sword 9 Songs, Qingfeng Song. Tuoba Tian roared angrily. His sword fingers were like swords that hung down from the heavens. Two killing swords slashed through the heavens and earth, as they slashed towards Yi Xian, with a sword light that could destroy the heavens and earth. Just you? Yi Xian laughed maniacally. A blood-red demonic moon rose behind him, and the world suddenly became blood-red. A blood moon sword condensed. As Yi Xian moved his sword fingers, it turned into an extremely beautiful sword radiance that slashed towards Tuoba Tian. Yi Xian was simply too terrifying. He himself was a 9-heaven saint king. Moreover, he had passed through the mutated primal chaos holy tribulation and opened up the primal chaos 12 Yuanhui world. His battle prowess was unstoppable. Clang! Tuoba Tian's two swords wailed and fell from the sky with a loud bang. Tuoba Tian's face was flushed red, and traces of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Clearly this attack had injured him. Kneel down. Yi Xian took a step forward. His 5 fingers were like a millstone of the heavens and earth. They possessed a supreme might that could annihilate mountains and rivers, as he slapped Tuoba Tian to the ground. Chapter 1194. Wah! Tuoba Tian could not dodge in time. Half of his face was swollen from Yi Xian's slap. One of his teeth fell out with blood, as he was slapped into the ground. Yi Xian did not use his full strength. If he used his full strength, Tuoba Tian would have been turned into a pile of minced meat in an instant. Of course, this was not because Tuoba Tian was weak. Firstly, he did not use his full strength. Secondly, he did not expect Yi Xian's battle strength to be so terrifying. Bang! Yi Xian stomped his foot on Tuoba Tian's head. His foot exploded with a terrifying force, stomping Tuoba Tian into the ground and ruthlessly crushing him. You piece of trash. I did not want to lower myself to your level, because we are both spiritual sons. However, you have mocked me time and time again. Do you really think that I, Yao Yueya, am easy to bully? Bang! Yi Xian stomped down, causing the ground to shake violently. Half of Tuoba Tian's body was buried into the ground as a large amount of blood flowed out. Yao Yueya, I will kill you. Rumble! Heaven and earth changed as sword chi whistled through the sky. Tuoba Tian's chest burned with anger as he activated his Saint Monarch world. Sword chi filled the sky as a terrifying pressure pressed down on Yi Xian. Yi Xian frowned. This Saint Monarch world was indeed terrifying. Fortunately, he had also opened up his own Saint Monarch world. Although he could not reveal it to others, he could still use it in his body. Tuoba Tian's Saint Monarch world could not harm him in the slightest. Insignificant skill. How dare you be so presumptuous? Yi Xian fiercely roared as his 5 fingers smashed down towards Tuoba Tian, forcefully breaking apart his opponent's Saint King world. Yi Xian had used all of his strength in this attack, and even contained the power of his world. Tuoba Tian was not weak. Even Yi Xian had to treat him seriously. Not only did he have to hide his true cultivation, he also had to use Yao Yueya's appearance to suppress him. He would not give him a chance to turn the tables. Pooh! Tuoba Tian spat out another mouthful of blood, as several of his ribs were broken. However, these were only light injuries. After all, he had the Chong Yuan sword body. Yi Xian's attack could not seriously injure him. 2 spiritual sons, please stop fighting. If the patrolling spirit envoys are attracted, I'm afraid you 2 spiritual sons will be punished. The Star City Lord. Yi Xian's eyes. And he looked at Yi Xian's eyes. Yi Xian's face was dirty, but his eyes had never looked at him. Yao Yueya, I was careless today, but don't be complacent. You humiliated me like this today. I will definitely return it 100 times over in the future. Trash. Yi Xian's words were filled with disdain. Those 2 words expressed his attitude towards Tuoba Tian. He did not care about his threat at all. Chi. Suddenly, a streak of light streaked across the sky. As the light dissipated, a person in golden armor appeared between Yi Xian and Tuoba Tian. This person's face could not be seen clearly, but the aura he released was extremely powerful. Even Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. What's going on? This person was covered in golden armor. He wore a golden mask. Although his face could not be seen clearly, he was coldly asking the two of them. Greetings, patrolling spirit envoys. The Star City Lord hurriedly paid his respects. Clearly, this person had an extraordinary status. He was not someone a small city lord like him could neglect. Nothing. Tuoba Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and glared fiercely at Yi Xian. He strode into the city lord's mansion. Clearly, he hated Yi Xian for what happened today. Greetings, patrolling spirit envoys. Yi Xian cupped his hands slightly as a greeting. Spirit sons are not allowed to kill each other. This is the rule of the 10,000 Spirit Palace. I hope you do not break the rule. Otherwise, I will report it impartially. The patrolling spirit envoy said in a deep voice. Of course. I'll have to trouble the spirit envoy to worry. Yi Xian lightly smiled. The patrolling spirit envoys had a special position in the 10,000 Spirit Palace. They never showed their faces to others, but they had great power. They were responsible for patrolling the disciples and reporting to the 10,000 Spirit Palace. There was a rule in the 10,000 Spirit Palace that disciples were not allowed to kill each other. Even the 12 spirit sons had to follow this rule. The duty of the patrolling spirit envoys was to supervise the disciples. Of course, these people did not show their faces to others. They changed every 10,000 years, so no one knew their true identity in the 10,000 Spirit Palace. After all, the patrolling spirit envoys were in charge of offending others. Their identities were naturally hidden. Otherwise, if they were to attract revenge, it would not be worth it. Although Tuoba Tian is a bit arrogant, your words are too vicious. I will pretend that I did not see what happened today. I hope the two of you will not cause trouble in my territory. Otherwise, I can only impartially enforce the law. The patrolling spirit envoy said in a deep voice. Spirit envoys, don't worry. As long as he does not provoke me, I will not give you any trouble. Yi Xian said with a faint smile. Looking at the elegant smile on Yi Xian's face, the patrolling spirit envoy's eyes hidden under the mask slightly narrowed. He naturally knew Yao Yueya. His other identity had crossed paths with Yao Yueya. However, in his impression, Yao Yueya was very magnanimous when dealing with people. He would never argue with others, so why was he so overbearing today? However, the patrolling spirit envoys did not suspect anything. After all, he had already used his Dharma eyes to look at Yao Yueya. He was indeed not someone else. However, what made him extremely surprised was that Yao Yueya had returned from the southern Do Great region. Although he was still a Nine Heavens Saint King, his battle prowess had shocked him. Tomorrow, I will personally activate the teleportation formation. Goodbye. The patrolling spirit envoys cupped his hands and turned into a streak of light as he left. Clearly, he did not want to have too much interaction with Yi Xian. Looking at the patrolling spirit envoy's figure leaving, Yi Xian's mouth curled into a strange smile as he muttered. It seems that the 10,000-mile Sky Palace is indeed filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers. I can see such a person in a small Stardo city. If Yi Xian was not wrong, the patrolling spirit envoys just now was a manifestation realm cultivator. Some people might ask why a manifestation realm cultivator caught Yi Xian's attention. Actually, the reason was very simple. Because this patrolling spirit envoys was not an ordinary manifestation realm cultivator, but a manifestation realm cultivator with a powerful battle constitution. It had been mentioned before. Every realm had a difference in strength. An ordinary manifestation realm cultivator could not compare to a battle constitution. The difference was like heaven and earth. For example, Yi Xian was currently a Nine Heavens Saint King. When he unleashed his full strength, he could definitely kill an ordinary manifestation realm cultivator. However, if he were to fight against this person, Yi Xian was not confident that he could defeat him. This was because there was a difference of a whole realm between them. Unless he used two of his strongest powers, he might not be able to truly fight against him. For example, Violet Spirit had killed Reverend Water Yuan with just a single strike. Not even his bones were left behind. The Extremine realm was indeed terrifying, but it was not so terrifying that it could kill a second manifestation realm cultivator with a single blow. Violet's spirit was so terrifying because she had a battle constitution, while Venerable Water Yuan only had a mortal body. This person seems to know Yao Yueya. I wonder who he is in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Every patrolling spirit envoys was an outstanding figure in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. However, no one knew their true identities, so the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace had strict rules. Very few people dared to confide in others. Spirit child, please enter. The Stardow City Lord humbly led the way for Yi Xian, and Yi Xian strode into the City Lord's mansion. Chapter 1195. The next morning, a golden formation appeared above the City Lord's estate. The Spirit Emissary Patrol from yesterday was activating the teleportation formation, while Yi Xian and Tuoba Tian stood to one side and waited patiently. Every time the teleportation formation was activated, it would take an incense stick's worth of time. After all, the central region was just too vast. It would take far too much time to travel on one's own. Only a teleportation formation could shorten the journey. After what happened yesterday, Tuoba Tian had learned his lesson. At this moment, he didn't even look at Yi Xian. However, the hatred in his eyes didn't decrease, but instead increased. It was obvious that he was planning on how to take revenge on Yi Xian. Activate. The Spirit Emissary Patrol formed a seal with both hands. The teleportation formation rumbled as a door of golden light appeared. Strands of spacetime vaguely seeped out. Strange. Extremely strange. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes as a strange light flickered through his eyes. He was not curious about the teleportation formation. Instead, he was curious about the spatial force within it. After all, when he came to the central region from the southern Do region, the region teleportation formation contained spatial force. At that time, he had become suspicious. Had the region teleportation formation been created by the space-time Divine Hall? The teleportation formation was the same. It contained spatial force as well, which was why it could teleport. Yi Xian was extremely sensitive to the power of time and space, because he'd cultivated the power of time and space himself. However, the thing that made Yi Xian feel the most helpless was that his usage of the power of time and space was too crude. It was like a person who had a pile of ingredients, but did not know how to make a dish. That was exactly Yi Xian's current state. He possessed spatial force, but the way he used it was extremely simple. He could not truly unleash the mysteries that spatial force should have. For example, the teleportation formation that was activated right now only contained spatial force, but it could shorten an extremely vast journey to another place. As a result, Yi Xian thought that since he had cultivated spatial force, he should be able to teleport even without the teleportation formation. But what made Yi Xian very helpless was that he had the space-time power, but he did not know how to use it. If I can capture a disciple of the Temporal Temple, I might be able to learn how to use the power of space-time, Yi Xian thought to himself. The teleportation array has been activated. The two spiritual sons can be on their way now. The patrol spirit envoy said in a deep voice. Humph. Tuoba Tian glanced at Yi Xian from the corner of his eyes and snorted coldly. He strode into the teleportation array. Thank you, brother. If we meet in the main hall in the future, we can drink and chat happily. Yi Xian smiled at the heavenly patrol spirit envoy and patted his shoulder affectionately before stepping into the teleportation array. However, it was also Yi Xian's intimate actions that caused the spirit emissary to stop breathing. He took a deep look at Yi Xian's back before activating the teleportation formation. Yi Xian and the others also disappeared. Could it be that he recognized me? As Yi Xian and the others disappeared from the teleportation formation, the heavenly patrol spirit envoy slowly took off his golden mask, revealing a delicate face. This heavenly patrol spirit envoy was actually a young girl. At this moment, her eyebrows were slightly furrowed as she spoke in doubt. In the vast 9 heavens, there were 8 desolations and 6 laws. Jade palaces and palaces stood in great numbers. Clouds spread out and spiritual energy filled the sky. A total of 9 vast clouds covered the sky and the earth, turning this part of the world into 9 worlds. Every layer of clouds was guarded by soldiers. At the highest point of the 9th layer of heaven, there was a white jade palace. It stood proudly above the heavens and the universe, blooming with a myriad of spiritual light. Celestial islands floated, and there were many caves. This was the 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace, which was also the center of the entire chaotic world. Just by looking at it from afar, it gave off a sense of boundless reverence. Even one's breathing had to be careful. If Yi Xian had seen the grand scene of the celestial court, at this moment, when he saw the scene of the 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace, Yi Xian knew that he was a frog in a well. 9 layers of clouds, 9 worlds. The 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace was divided into 9 layers of heaven. Each layer of heaven was vast, and in the 9th layer of heaven was the Taoist field of the Master of all Spirits. Of course, since the Master of all Spirits became the strongest of all time, he rarely appeared in the world. There were only a few people who could see him. Even the so-called 12 spiritual sons had never seen the Master of all Spirits. The biggest wish of every spiritual son was to become the disciple of the Master of all Spirits. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the 1st layer of heaven. In front of him was a vast gate of heaven, which was guarded by 2 divine generals. But just these 2 divine generals had the cultivation of a sage king. This was enough to show how terrifying the 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace was. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was incomparably calm, but his heart was extremely shocked. Before he even entered the 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace, he could already feel that there were too many auras that were faintly overflowing that made him shudder. If an orthodoxy that was only established 100 million years ago was already so terrifying, then how terrifying would the other 9 orthodoxies be? As the saying goes, one can know the whole leopard from a single spot. The 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace had already given Yi Xian a great shock. The other 9 orthodoxies must have gone through a long period of time, and their foundations must be unimaginably terrifying. Humph! Suddenly, a cold snort came from behind Yi Xian. Tuoba Tian was striding toward the gate of heaven with 2 sword boys. However, when he passed by Yi Xian, he glared at Yi Xian fiercely. "Spiritual son, let's go." The coachman beside him reminded. Yi Xian nodded slowly and strode toward the gate of heaven. In front of the gate of heaven, the 2 heavenly generals were expressionless. They crossed their weapons in front of the gate of heaven and looked at Tuoba Tian and Yi Xian with a pair of cold eyes. "Token," the 2 heavenly generals said coldly. Tuoba Tian took out his token, and a ray of light flashed across the void. Only then did the 2 heavenly generals move aside, and Tuoba Tian strode into the palace. Obviously, one must show their token to enter the 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace. However, Yi Xian was already prepared. He took out Yao Yui's token and officially entered the 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palace under the scrutiny of the 2 heavenly generals. Ha ha ha! Suddenly, just as Yi Xian entered the gate of heaven, a loud laugh was heard. He saw 2 young men in luxurious robes strolling toward Tuoba Tian. It was obvious that the laughter came from them. "Brother Tuoba, did you get the celestial spirit immortal herb for Diwu Lingzi this time?" One of the young men with dashing eyebrows smiled at Tuoba Tian. "If Diwu Lingzi wants it, I will get it even if I have to go through fire and water." Tuoba Tian cupped his hands and gestured to the 2 with a smug smile on his face. "I was wondering who it was. So it's Diwu Lingzi." The other person glanced at Yi Xian with a sneer. Yi Xian did not know these 2 people, but he knew who they were. The one who spoke to Tuoba Tian was the 11th spiritual son, Li Xian. The one who mocked him was the 8th spiritual son, Xiao Wuyuan. Both of them were Diwu Lingzi's lackeys. Back then, Yao Yuya left the southern Dou territory. Although part of the reason was for the Tianyuan kingdom, the main reason was Diwu Lingzi's coercion. Yi Xian found out about these things from Yao Yuya. After all, he became the 9th spiritual son and needed to know about Yao Yuya's situation. 10,000 Spirit Celestial Palaces, 12 spiritual sons. This sentence sounded nice, but in fact it was a world of difference. Only the first 5 spiritual sons were the real core figures. They were also the seeds that the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace focused on cultivating. Although the other 7 spiritual sons were also extraordinary, They were insignificant compared to the first 5 spiritual sons. Speaking of which, Yao Yuye was unlucky. According to his cautious personality, he would never offend Di Wulingzi. However, Di Wulingzi had the yin-yang combat body. What was the yin-yang combat body? To put it bluntly, the yin-yang combat body was a transvestite. It could be said that it was neither male nor female. The body was filled with chaotic yin and yang qi. Yao Yuye had the demon moon combat body. The demon moon combat body belonged to yin, and Yao Yuye was a man. It could be said that there was yang in yin and yin in yang. He was the furnace that Di Wulingzi urgently needed. It could greatly enhance Di Wulingzi's cultivation. To put it bluntly, it was self-evident what Di Wulingzi wanted to do. Yao Yuye was indeed patient and scheming. However, he was also a man. To make him Di Wulingzi's plaything was even more terrifying than killing him. Therefore, he went to the southern Dou region, hoping to find the inheritance of a chaotic star master. Otherwise, why would he leave the central region? Fortunately, Yao Yuye was the 9th spiritual son. After all, with his identity, Di Wulingzi could not do anything to him. However, Yao Yuye's days were not easy. However, Di Wulingzi was indeed terrifying. The chaotic yin-yang combat body was extremely terrifying. This was because the chaotic yin and yang qi could only be produced when one stepped into the yin-yang realm. However, he was born with these 2 powers. As long as Di Wulingzi could step into the yin-yang realm, he could harmonize yin and yang. He could turn into a man or a woman. This was all within his thoughts. Moreover, his cultivation would be extremely terrifying. Although he could not be said to be invincible in the same realm, there would be few opponents. Chapter 1196. Among the 12 spiritual sons, their relationships could be said to be intricate and complicated. The 3 people in front of him were the lackeys of the 5th spiritual son. Therefore, when Yi Xian just arrived, he was mocked and ridiculed. Especially the 8th spiritual son, Xia Wuyuan. During the spiritual son ranking war, he was ranked ahead of Yao Yuye, and had always looked down on Yao Yuye. Not to mention that the 8th spiritual son looked down on Yao Yuye. This was also because Yao Yuye's style of doing things was extremely easygoing. No matter who mocked and ridiculed him, he could endure it. 9th brother, you are becoming more and more unruly. You don't even know how to greet your 8th brother? The 8th spiritual son, Xia Wuyuan, frowned and scolded. 9th brother, why are you so unruly after going to the southern Dou territory? The 11th spiritual son, Li Shiren, sneered. At this moment, Tuoba Tian looked on coldly from the side, but the corner of his mouth curved into a mocking smile. He wanted to see how Yao Yuye would deal with the 2 spiritual sons. One must know that the 12 spiritual sons had to address each other as brothers. Those who were ranked at the top had to be addressed as elder brother. When they met, they had to be humble and courteous. At this moment, the 8th spiritual son, Xia Wuyuan, was here. According to the normal rules, Yao Yuye had to go forward and bow to greet him. Of course, Yi Xian naturally knew this rule, but he did not do so. This was because he did not come to the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace to be bullied, and he was not Yao Yuye. Yi Xian could hypocritically call Violet Spirit, this silly girl, as elder sister, and shamelessly flatter her. This was because Violet Spirit was an expert of the Yin realm. She had an important position in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, and could be used by Yi Xian. However, the 2 spiritual sons in front of him were nothing in Yi Xian's eyes. It was simply impossible for him to compromise and humbly greet them. Moreover, Yi Xian did not want to keep a low profile. Anyway, he was using the identity of Yao Yuye. As long as no one knew that he was a fake, he could do whatever he wanted. Greetings, 8th brother. However, Yi Xian still had to deal with the rules that needed to be followed. Yi Xian cupped his hands and gestured slightly. This also made Xia Wuyuan's expression turn cold. His gaze toward Yi Xian instantly turned gloomy. One had to know that every time Yao Yuye saw him, he would be extremely respectful. However, Yao Yuye seemed to have become a completely different person after returning from the great southern Dou region. It was as if he didn't care about Yao Yuye at all. 11th brother, why don't I bow when I see 9th brother? Yi Xian looked at 11th spiritual son coldly, his words extremely sharp. You? Li Xian's expression changed. He didn't expect that Yi Xian would use words to deal with him, before he even started to make things difficult for him. Greetings, ninth brother. Li Xian snorted coldly, and casually cupped his hands towards Yi Xian. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Yi Xian said faintly, and was about to leave with a flick of his sleeve. He didn't have time to waste with the three of them. However, even if Yi Xian wanted to leave, how could the eighth spirit son, Xiao Wuyuan, let him go so easily? Ninth brother, we haven't seen each other for many years. It seems that ninth brother's cultivation must have improved after this trip to the great southern Dou region. I, eighth brother, would like to ask you for advice. Xiao Wuyuan quietly blocked Yi Xian's path. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, as he looked at Yi Xian, with a cruel expression. At this moment, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back, and looked indifferently at Xiao Wuyuan, who was blocking him. With just a glance, he could tell that the other party was only a ninth heaven saint king. However, the other party was only a step away from the creation realm. His cultivation was indeed stronger than Yao Yue's. However, he was only stronger than Yao Yue. Compared to Yi Xian, the eighth spiritual son was still no match. I have always been curious. Fifth spiritual son has the chaotic yin-yang combat body. Eighth brother, you are his lackey. Do you have to be played with by him every day? I think this is also something that everyone is curious about. Yi Xian said faintly. What did you say? Xiao Wuyuan was stunned at first. Then his face suddenly flushed red. A sinister look flashed across his eyes as he looked at Yi Xian, with extremely terrifying murderous intent. Fifth spiritual son was neither male nor female. This was a well-known fact. In the entire Myriad Spirit Palace, very few people were willing to come into contact with fifth spiritual son. It was not only because fifth spiritual son was unreasonable and violent, but also because fifth spiritual son liked both men and women. It was simply unacceptable. As fifth spiritual son's lackey, many people guessed that eighth spiritual son Xiao Wuyuan and the others were fifth spiritual son's exclusive property. Although no one dared to mention this, Xiao Wuyuan also knew that others looked at him strangely. This was also the greatest humiliation in his heart. Eighth brother, I am actually very envious of you. You can accompany fifth spiritual son every day. TSK. This is a great honor. When fifth spiritual son steps into the yin-yang realm and transforms into a true peerless beauty, eighth brother, you will be blessed. Yi Xian sighed, as if he was really happy for Xiao Wuyuan. However, his tone changed as he shook his head and sighed. If fifth spiritual son transforms into a woman, it will be fine. But if he transforms into a man, I really feel sorry for eighth brother. However, love is still a great thing. Even if fifth spiritual son transforms into a man, I think eighth brother will still be loyal and unswerving, right? Yao Yue, I will kill you. Xiao Wuyuan's face was ashen as he roared. Facing Yi Xian's hidden insult, this directly caused him to go berserk. Go to hell. Xiao Wuyuan was a ninth heaven Saint King Peak, and had the extremely rare Xianming combat body. At this moment, when he was furious, this part of the world was covered by dark clouds. The sky was filled with dark thunder that raged in the sky. Chi, 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 chi. The dark thunder filled the sky, destroying the world. Xiao Wuyuan suddenly attacked, and this part of the world was drowned in lightning. It struck towards Yi Xian violently. Eighth brother, be careful. Tuoba Tian had already suffered at the hands of Yi Xian previously. He warned Xiao Wuyuan loudly, deeply afraid that Xiao Wuyuan would suffer at the hands of Yi Xian due to his carelessness. With just you, Yi Xian whispered cruelly. He took a step forward, passing through the dark thunder that filled the sky. His speed was simply unimaginable, and he instantly appeared in front of Xiao Wuyuan. I will teach you how to behave. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. His 5 fingers were like a curtain that covered the sky. The exploding void saint light in the violent primordial chaos ruthlessly and mercilessly slapped down towards Xiao Wuyuan. Bang! Xiao Wuyuan's expression changed drastically, because he did not see clearly when Yi Xian appeared in front of him. He hurriedly raised his hand towards Yi Xian, But in the next moment, a sharp pain came from his palms, causing him to groan in pain. Crack! Ah! The ear-piercing sound of bones cracking came from Xiao Wuyuan's hands. His 10 fingers broke inch by inch, and large amounts of blood seeped out from his perlicue. His palms instantly became a bloody mess. Careless, too careless. Xiao Wuyuan was really too careless. If he had treated Yi Xian seriously, he definitely would not have suffered such heavy injuries. However, he believed that Yi Xian was not his match, which caused him to suffer a great loss instantly. Chapter 1197. One had to know that Yi Xian's physical body had been tempered, and he had even engraved the first level of the astral origin art, the Chaos Spirit Gathering Array. Even the Panga clan, who was at the same level as Yi Xian, might not dare to take on such an overbearing attack from Yi Xian, let alone Xiao Wuyuan. Eighth brother. Tuoba Tian and Li Xian roared in fear. The two of them had never expected that Xiao Wuyuan, the eighth spiritual son, would suffer such a great loss with just one attack. As the saying went, take advantage of one's weakness. Yi Xian attacked again, after his successful attack. He would definitely not give Xiao Wuyuan the chance to use the Sage King's world, and have a great battle with Yi Xian. Bang! Yi Xian's 5 fingers were like a millstone of heaven and earth, as he ruthlessly slapped Xiao Wuyuan's face. The huge force that erupted instantly knocked Xiao Wuyuan to the ground, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. At that moment, Xiao Wuyuan's consciousness was a little dazed after suffering 2 consecutive heavy blows from Yi Xian. He had been too careless, and ended up in such a state. How dare you be disrespectful to eighth brother? Tuoba Tian and Li Xian quickly came to their senses, and blocked in front of Xiao Wuyuan. The 2 spiritual sons even erupted with extremely terrifying power, as if they were about to attack Yi Xian in the next moment. To be honest, Yi Xian wanted to kill to establish his authority, because he knew very well that as long as he killed the 3 spiritual sons, others would definitely not dare to offend him. However, Yi Xian knew that he could only think about it. After all, this was the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. If he really killed the 3 people in front of him, he would probably be severely punished by the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Moreover, even if Yi Xian wanted to kill the 3 of them without any scruples, the 3 of them were in the 9 Heavens Saint King realm, and had powerful battle constitutions. Unless he unleashed his full combat strength, he would definitely not be able to kill the 3 of them. Yi Xian knew very well that the snake would be harmed if it was not killed. Yi Xian's principle of doing things had always been to kill all of them, and not leave any future troubles for himself. However, the current situation did not allow him to kill the 3 of them. Kid, someone's coming. Suddenly, Gai Tianyuan's voice rang out in Yi Xian's ears. This caused Yi Xian to come to his senses in an instant, and the killing intent around him receded in an instant. Who is fighting here? Chi! Chi! Several dozen streaks of light shot over from afar, instantly appearing in front of Yi Xian and the others. As the light dissipated, several dozen divine generals appeared. Their leader wore silver-white battle armor, and was currently frowning as he looked at Yi Xian and the others. So it's a battle between 4 spiritual sons. It seems like I'll have to report this to the Sky Capital Court, the divine general in white said coldly. With that, Tuoba Tian and Li Xian's faces changed. A sliver of fear flashed through their eyes, and their presences immediately dispersed. One must know that the Sky Capital Court was in charge of the punishment of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. If this matter was reported to the Sky Capital Court, they would definitely be heavily punished. We're just sparring. It seems like the Divine General has misunderstood, Li Xian hurriedly explained. That's right. We're just sparring. There's no real battle. This is just a small matter. I don't think there's a need to report it to the Sky Capital Court, right? Tuoba Tian said coldly. Since it's a sparring, please continue sparring in the training hall. I'll pretend that I didn't see anything today. If the spiritual sons start fighting again, I'll have to enforce the law impartially. The Divine General in white bowed to the 4 of them. The Divine General in white didn't want to make things difficult for the 4 spiritual sons. After all, he was just a small Divine General. The reason he brought up the Sky Capital Court was because he didn't want the spiritual sons to continue fighting. Otherwise, if something were to happen, he would definitely be held accountable by the higher-ups. This was a price he couldn't afford to pay. Cough cough. Suddenly, there was a light cough. Xiao Wuyuan slowly stood up with blood stains on the corner of his mouth. His palms were badly mutilated, and he looked at Yi Xian with an extremely sinister gaze. Ninth brother, let's wait and see. Diwu's spiritual son won't let you off. Let's go. It wasn't that Xiao Wuyuan didn't want to take revenge, but he knew that he couldn't do it now. Otherwise, it would definitely be reported to the Sky Capital Court. This wouldn't do them any good. Moreover, Xiao Wuyuan and the others clearly knew that Diwu's spiritual son had been coveting Yao Yueya for a long time. Now that Yao Yueya had returned from the Great Southern Dou region, he would definitely take action. As Xiao Wuyuan and the others left, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. An imperceptible killing intent flashed past. These people and Diwu's spiritual son were already on the death list. Yi Xian was a person who either didn't do anything or went to the extreme. This was because he deeply understood the principle of cutting weeds without removing the roots. Exterminating and leaving no one alive was Yi Xian's principle of doing things. He wouldn't leave any trouble for himself. And the best way to solve this problem was to kill them. Only then could he truly have peace and quiet. However, Yi Xian had just arrived at the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, so he still had to be careful. It wasn't difficult to kill Tuoba Tian, Xiao Wuyuan, and the others, but he had to consider the consequences of killing these people. Moreover, if Yi Xian didn't sense wrongly, Diwu's spiritual son's cultivation was extremely terrifying. He couldn't kill him just because he wanted to. He didn't know who was stronger between him and Diwu's spiritual son. Yi Xian pondered for a while. The killing intent in his heart had already been set. He just had to wait for him to settle down in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. These people had to be killed. Otherwise, it would only cause countless troubles in the future. Thank you, Lord Divine General. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have suffered a great loss just now. Yi Xian was gentle and elegant. He cupped his hands and bowed to the white-robed Divine General. His words were extremely sincere. I don't dare. Diwu's spiritual son is too serious. The white-robed Divine General hurriedly returned the bow. He didn't expect the dignified Diwu's spiritual son to thank him. This immediately made him feel flattered. It should be known that these Divine Generals were extremely lowly in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Their status was extremely low. Other than patrolling the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace every day, they didn't have any power. Many people looked down on these Divine Generals and ordered them around like slaves. Lord Divine General, don't be modest. I love making friends the most in my life. If Lord Divine General thinks highly of me, let's be friends. Yi Xian hurriedly helped the white-robed Divine General up. I don't dare. The white-robed Divine General's heart warmed, but he still bowed respectfully. However, his impression of Yi Xian instantly became extremely good. I obtained this wind and thunder fan by chance in the Great Southern Dou region. Although it's not a powerful spiritual treasure, it's definitely not an ordinary item. Today, I'm giving it to Divine General. If Divine General thinks highly of me, please don't refuse. Yi Xian flipped his hand, and the wind and thunder fan appeared in his hand. He directly placed it in the white-robed Divine General's hand, not allowing him to refuse. Then I thank you, spiritual son. The white-robed Divine General could not recommend him. Moreover, he could feel the power of the wind and thunder fan. This also made him have a good impression of Yi Xian. Once again, he was about to bow to Yi Xian. If you want to treat me as a friend, then don't treat me like an outsider. May I know your name, Divine General? Yi Xian said with a smile. My surname is Bai and my name is Zhe. If spiritual son needs me to do anything in the future, please feel free to tell me. Bai Zhe said firmly. So it's Brother Bai. It's my honor to make friends with Brother Bai today. Yi Xian laughed heartily. Then his eyes moved slightly. He flipped his hand and took out a bottle of elixir and handed it to Bai Zhe again. Then he looked at the many Divine Generals behind him and said, Today it's all thanks to your appearance. Otherwise, I would have suffered a great loss at the hands of those spiritual sons. I don't dare to say that this bottle of primary spirit elixir is the best elixir, but it can still increase your cultivation. Take it as my thanks for your help today. Bai Zai hurriedly scolded the divine generals behind him. Why aren't you thanking spiritual son? Thank you, ninth spiritual son. The dozens of divine generals looked excited and hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. There was a touch of gratitude in their eyes. The gratitude in their eyes was not because of the elixir given by Yi Xian, but because of the dignity that Yi Xian had given them. It should be known that these divine generals were just pawns of the 10,000 spirit celestial palace. Not to mention the so-called spiritual sons. Even some divine officials did not take them seriously. At this moment, Yi Xian treated them with respect and gave them enough dignity. How could they not be moved? Dignity, this was something that everyone had. And Yi Xian happened to understand human nature very well. Don't forget that he was the master of the celestial court. How many people could compare with him in the way of handling people? Yi Xian knew very well what these low-level divine generals needed. They needed dignity and they needed to be valued. In addition to the favor that he had given them, these divine generals were enough to be used by him in the future. Perhaps some people would ask, they are just low-level divine generals. How can they be of any help to Yi Xian? But there was a saying that was very good. A high platform of 10,000 feet was built on the earth. 1,000 miles of feet began with a single step. A single spark could start a prairie fire. In this vast and boundless 10,000 spirit celestial palace, who had the most people? The answer was these low-level divine generals. No one looked up to these divine generals, but Yi Xian did the opposite. This was his outstanding point. And it was also his skill of handling people when he was in charge of the celestial court. As a superior, Yi Xian deeply understood a principle. These divine generals seemed to be low-level, but the power that they gathered together could not be ignored. At a certain time in the future, they could erupt with monstrous power. A single spark was not enough to start a prairie fire, but hundreds of millions of sparks gathered together could even burn down the sky. Chapter 1198. Farewell, Lingzi. Yi Xian smiled and nodded as he was sent off by the many divine generals. Then he slowly walked towards his training ground. He was extremely easygoing from the beginning to the end. Looking at Yi Xian's departure, one of the divine generals said in a deep voice, Brother Bai, we have received Jiu Lingzi's kindness. We can't repay him at all. That's right. Bai Zai shook his head helplessly. They were just low-level divine generals. Today they received Yi Xian's gift. Not only were they touched, but they also felt a deep sense of helplessness. This was because they knew that they couldn't give Yi Xian anything in return. Brothers, remember this. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Although we are insignificant, we will definitely repay Jiu Lingzi's kindness if we have the chance. Not only did he give us these elixirs, but he also gave us the dignity of being human. Bai Zai was the big brother of the divine generals. When he solemnly said these words, the other divine generals all nodded. Their respect for Yi Xian was quietly planted in their hearts. A seed was quietly planted in the hearts of these divine generals by Yi Xian. This might seem insignificant, but Yi Xian knew that under his nurturing, this seed would take root and sprout sooner or later. It would eventually grow into a towering tree. The ninth spiritual palace. This was Yao Yeyue's training ground. It was also Jiu Lingzi's residence. There weren't many people in the ninth spiritual palace. Other than the two Dao children guarding it, there were only 4 maids and a coachman. They were also the people who had been following Yao Yue. As Yi Xian entered the ninth spiritual palace, the 2 Dao children quickly came forward and bowed to Yi Xian. They even prepared Yi Xian to bathe and change his clothes. After entering Yao Yeye's lair, Yi Xian was finally able to relax a little. However, during this period of time, some embarrassing things happened. While Yi Xian was bathing, 4 peerless beauties entered and personally helped him bathe and change his clothes. Although Yi Xian didn't abstain from women, he didn't want to have anything to do with these 4 maids. Naturally, he sent them away. However, Yi Xian's actions did not match Yao Yue's, and the 4 maids left in disappointment. Outside the hall, The four maids were whispering to each other. Have you guys felt it? Ever since Lingzi returned to the Grand Central Territory, I've always felt that he was acting strange. Normally, we sisters would take care of him when he bathes and changes his clothes. But today, he chased us out, Xiazhu said. I feel it too. Although we Lingzi usually treat people kindly, we have never been so polite to these immortal generals. Chunlan interrupted. Also, did you notice that our spiritual son's cultivation has increased greatly? That Tua Batian and Xiao Wuyuan have suffered greatly. They even spoke rudely to Diwu's spiritual son, Qiuju said doubtfully. Ba, don't talk nonsense. If Lingzi finds out about this, he will definitely teach you guys a lesson. Dong Shui quickly interrupted her sister's conversation. At this moment, the four maids didn't know that their entire conversation had been heard by Yi Xian. In the 9th spiritual hall, inside the spiritual spring, Yi Xian walked out of the spring. With a flip of his hand, a white robe covered his body. His hair fell behind his head. After bathing, he looked even more handsome. However, Yi Xian's expression was a little gloomy. He squinted his eyes slightly because he had discovered a hidden danger. Even though he had cultivated the heavenly cicada transformation and could make others unable to see through his true body, and he was also imitating Yao Yuyi in many aspects. These four women had always been by Yao Yuyi's side, and had even had physical contact. His abnormal actions had definitely aroused their suspicions. A person's appearance could be changed, but feelings could not be changed, especially for women who had had physical contact with him. Only the dead can keep a secret. Yi Xian stroked his chin. His voice was cold and sinister. A murderous intent quietly flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian would never allow his identity to be exposed. Since the four maids had already become suspicious, the best solution was to kill them. However, now was not the time to act. After all, he had just arrived at the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, and the four maids by his side had died. This would definitely arouse the suspicions of others. Yi Xian had always done things without leaving a trace. All hidden dangers had to be nipped in the bud. His most common method was to kill decisively. This was also the most effective method. However, now was not the time to kill these four women. He had something more important to do. Diwu Lingzi. Today, he had dealt a heavy blow to 3 spiritual sons. Diwu Lingzi would definitely not let this matter rest. It wouldn't be long before he came looking for trouble. Moreover, before heading to the Grand Central Territory, Yi Xian had heard from Yao Yuyi that Diwu Lingzi had been forcing him. In order to make him his exclusive property, Diwu Lingzi would definitely not let this matter rest. Therefore, Yao Yuyi's troubles had now become Yi Xian's and needed to be solved by Yi Xian. This was something that could not be helped. After all, he had transformed into Yao Yuyi's appearance at this moment. Where is Diwu Lingzi? Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was deep in thought, a thunderous roar came from outside the 9th Spirit Palace. This caused Yi Xian to narrow his eyes. He did not expect trouble to come knocking on his door so quickly. Lingzi, the divine officials of the 5th Spirit Palace are here. The four maids outside spoke in a panic. Obviously, the arrival of the 5th Spirit Palace had made them extremely nervous. Got it. Yi Xian calmly tidied his clothes before strolling outside. Yi Xian was not a person who was afraid of trouble. Since he dared to take action against Xiao Wuyuan and the others, he was already prepared to face Diwu Lingzi. After all, this trouble would have to be solved sooner or later. Inside the 9th Spirit Palace, Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void. A divine official stood proudly in front of him. Even if he only had the cultivation of a minor saint, judging from his attitude, it seemed that he did not put Yi Xian in his eyes. It was not that the divine officials were arrogant, but because he was a member of the 5th Spirit Palace and represented Diwu Lingzi. Therefore, he showed a fearless attitude. Diwu Lingzi has passed down a decree. He wants you to go to the 5th Spirit Palace and have an audience with him now. The divine officials said coldly. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not reply. It was as if he treated the divine officials as air. This also caused the divine officials' expression to change. He said coldly again, "Do you dare to defy the decree? Lay Lan, break his dog legs and throw him out." Yi Xian said indifferently. Lei Lan was the name of the coachman. This person was also Yao Yui's servant. He was a great saint. When he heard Yi Xian's order, his expression changed immediately. He did not expect Yi Xian to be so bold. Yes, Lingzi. Lei Lan wanted to dissuade Yi Xian. However, when he saw Yi Xian's cold eyes, he could not help but shiver. He then strode towards the divine officials with a ferocious look on his face. You dare. I am the divine officials of the Fifth Spirit Palace. If you touch me, Diwu Lingzi. Crack. Although Lei Lan was a servant, he was indeed ruthless. With a slap, the divine officials coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. His fingers turned into knives and cut off the divine officials' legs, causing the divine officials to howl in pain. With his legs cut off, a large amount of blood flowed out. The divine officials roared in grief and indignation. He could not believe what had happened to him. Go back and tell Diwu Lingzi. Who does he think he is? Just because he wants me to have an audience with him, I have to have an audience with him? If he wants to see me, let him come personally. You can scram now, Yi Xian said coldly. He then waved his hand, indicating for Lei Lan to throw this person out. Bam! Lei Lan carried the wailing divine officials out of the Ninth Spirit Palace. Even though the divine officials' legs were cut off, he was still a small saint after all. Therefore, he immediately flew into the skies to escape. However, this scene was caught by many people. They were shocked that Yao Yuya would have the guts to do something so ridiculous. Chapter 1199. Fifth Spirit Palace. Lingzi, this Yao Yuya not only insulted you, he even crippled my legs. He doesn't put you in his eyes at all. The heavenly official wailed under the palace. His appearance was extremely miserable. Ha ha ha. A sharp laughter was heard. A young man was laughing while covering his mouth with a handkerchief. His face was covered with a thick layer of rouge, making people's hair stand on end. This person had a pair of peach blossom eyes and wore a pink dress. However, his appearance was that of a man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. Just by looking at his appearance, he could be called a handsome man. However, with his outfit, he gave people a feeling that he was neither male nor female. This little nine is getting bolder. He even dares to touch my people. However, this spirit child likes his shrewdness. Fifth spirit child, Ji Yinyang. He was laughing while covering his mouth with a handkerchief. His pretentious female posture gave people goosebumps, but his peach blossom eyes were shining with a cold light. Fifth brother. This Yao Yuya went to the southern Dou territory and became arrogant. If you don't teach him a lesson, I'm afraid he will really go to heaven. Tuoba Tianhua added oil to the fire. Yes, fifth brother. Not only did this brat dare to touch us, he even dared to injure the heavenly official sent by fifth brother. He doesn't put fifth brother in his eyes at all. Xiao Wuyuan pretended to be angry. Ha ha ha. Fifth spirit child Ji Yinyang covered his mouth and laughed. However, his voice was too sharp. Since little nine wants me to visit him personally, then I will go personally. After all, he is my future wife. Ji Yinyang laughed. Ji Yinyang said and walked outside. Fortunately, the three spirit children were already familiar with Ji Yinyang. If it was someone else, they would have been disgusted. Fifth spirit child, Ji Yinyang, walked out and immediately attracted attention from all directions. Everyone knew what kind of person Ji Yinyang was, and secretly felt pity for Yao Yuya. Why did he have to offend fifth spirit child? The battle between spirit children had always existed. The big shots of the 10,000 spirit palace also let it go. As long as it was not a matter of life and death, they naturally would not participate. To put it more bluntly, even if the fifth spirit son really did kill Yao Yuya, the higher-ups would only reprimand him, and would definitely not punish him. The law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, was not only the law of survival in the chaotic world, but also the law of training the disciples of the 10,000 spirit palace. Yao Yuya's demon moon battle body was indeed not bad, but compared to Ji Yinyang's chaotic Yin-Yang battle body, it was far too lacking. Moreover, everyone knew that Ji Yinyang wanted to enter the Yin-Yang realm as soon as possible, so he wanted Yao Yuya to be his furnace. Therefore, no one would care about this kind of thing. the big shots of the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, would also not get involved in the disputes of the younger generation. As long as the matter did not blow up too big, they would naturally let it slide. Not good, spirit child. The fifth spirit child is really coming towards us. The four maids were chattering like sparrows as they quickly entered the ninth spirit palace to report to Yi Xian. The four of them appeared to be extremely panicked. It was obvious that they were very clear about how terrifying Diwu Lingzi was. What are you afraid of? I've been waiting for him. Yi Xian's mouth curved into a strange smile as he coldly scolded the four maids. Yi Xian had long wanted to meet this effeminate transvestite to see how powerful he was. Even Yao Yuya had a deep fear in her eyes when Diwu Lingzi was mentioned. Yi Xian, you have to be careful. The chaotic yin-yang battle body is not ordinary. This battle body naturally carries the embryonic form of the chaotic yin and yang qi. If you are careless, you will definitely suffer a great loss. Gai Tinyuan's voice sounded in Yi Xian's ears. How is it compared to your heavenly origin battle body? Yi Xian smiled faintly. Naturally, it can't be compared. Gai Tianyuan said proudly. His battle body is not as good as your heavenly origin battle body. What do I have to fear? Yi Xian said faintly. Rumble. Like thunder piercing through the sky. An extremely terrifying fluctuation came from outside the ninth spirit palace. It was obvious that the fifth spirit child Ji Yinyang had arrived outside the palace. Little Jiao, your fifth brother has come to visit you personally. Don't you want to come out and welcome me? Ji Yinyang's sharp voice came. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Just hearing this voice made him feel extremely disgusted. Damn transvestite. Yi Xian said in disgust and strode out of the palace. Outside, Ji Yinyang stood in the void in a pink dress with a silk handkerchief in her hand. When Yi Xian walked out of the palace, the two's eyes met. Ji Yinyang's breath stopped, and the smile on her face suddenly disappeared. She frowned slightly, and a trace of doubt flashed across her eyes. She instantly used her yin-yang eye to constantly examine Yi Xian. Just by looking at Yi Xian's eyes, Ji Yinyang's heart skipped a beat. Yi Xian's eyes were overbearing and sharp, which shocked Ji Yinyang to the core. One had to know that every time Yao Yuya saw him, Yao Yuya's eyes would avoid looking at him. Moreover, Yao Yuya's attitude was very submissive. How could it be like this? However, when Ji Yinyang used his yin-yang eye to look at Yi Xian, he found that the other party was indeed Yao Yuya, and not someone else's disguise. This made him suppress his suspicions and think that Yao Yuya must have gained something in the southern Do Great region. That was why he had the confidence to confront him. Life and death realm. This person was very strong. With just a glance, Yi Xian could feel Ji Yinyang's cultivation, and faintly felt a sense of threat. Do you see? This is the strength of the battle body. Although Ji Yinyang is only in the life and death realm, he has the chaotic yin-yang battle body. With your current cultivation, unless you use your strongest power, you won't be his opponent, Gai Tianyuan said in a deep voice. Hearing Gai Tianyuan's words, Yi Xian slowly nodded. If he only relied on his current cultivation of a Nine Heavens Saint King, he would indeed not be Ji Yinyang's opponent. Unless he used his full cultivation, he would not be able to truly fight Ji Yinyang. The fifth spirit son was already so terrifying. The four spirit sons ranked before him would be even more difficult to deal with. From this, one could see how deep the foundation of the 10,000 spirit palace was. Little Jiao, you know that fifth brother has always liked you. As long as you listen to fifth brother will definitely not treat you badly. Ji Yinyang said gently, but his attitude was too disgusting. Yi Xian had an impulse to kill him. Damn transvestite, you're really disgusting. I suddenly want to kill you, Yi Xian said coldly. As Yi Xian's words fell, Ji Yinyang was still smiling, but his pair of peach blossom eyes gradually turned cold. This was because the term, damn transvestite, was taboo for him. Anyone who violated it would become a dead person. Little Jiao, you're getting bolder and bolder. How dare you insult me? But seeing that you have the demon moon battle body, fifth brother won't bicker with you. Today, follow me back to the fifth spirit palace and cultivate peacefully by my side, Ji Yinyang said with a smile. Chapter 1200. Oh, Yi Xian said coldly. That depends on your ability. Okay. Ha ha ha. Ji Yinyang laughed. But the next moment, the silk handkerchief in his hand shot out, covering the sky and rolling toward Yi Xian. Sword come. Whoosh, whoosh, let me see what else you can do. Whoosh, whoosh. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a sinister smile. His sword finger suddenly streaked across the sky, and the 4 immortal slaying swords rumbled as they transformed into 4 sword beams that shot towards Ji Yinyang. Whoosh, whoosh, boom. Suddenly, a dot of black light appeared in front of Ji Yinyang. The 3-meter-long halberd attacked. The black light was so dazzling that Ji Yinyang narrowed his eyes and retreated rapidly. It's too late. Yi Xian grinned viciously. He controlled the heaven-destroying halberd to smash down on Ji Yinyang's head. Yi Xian had been preparing for this attack for a long time. The 4 banishing immortal swords were merely a pretense. Bang! Ji Yinyang let out a muffled groan as he was sent flying by the heaven-destroying halberd. He plummeted to the ground. Unfortunately, Yi Xian could not use the destructive power of the heaven-destroying halberd. Otherwise, even if this attack did not take the man's life, it would at least severely injure him. Bang! Yi Xian took a step forward. Before Ji Yinyang could land, he punched him in the face and sent him flying again. Ji Yinyang did not even have time to react. Although the heaven-destroying halberd did not contain destructive power, it was still the #1 killing weapon of all time. It made Ji Yinyang's consciousness blur, and he was forced to endure Yi Xian's attacks. Yi Xian's physical body was too strong. Although he did not have a body of battle, his physical body was definitely stronger than Ji Yinyang's. His storm-like attacks instantly put Ji Yinyang at a disadvantage. Boom! His fist shook the sky and the void collapsed. Ji Yinyang was sent flying like a rubber ball. Yi Xian pressed forward, not giving him a chance to react. Die! Yi Xian's killing intent was piercing. He summoned the heaven-destroying halberd and appeared in front of Ji Yinyang in an instant. He aimed the halberd at the center of Ji Yinyang's eyebrows. It seemed that he wanted to kill Ji Yinyang. "Fifth brother, be careful," the 3 spiritual sons exclaimed. They did not expect Yi Xian to be so powerful. Even Ji Yinyang was at a disadvantage. "Little 9, have you had enough?" Suddenly, a cold voice reverberated between heaven and earth. Yi Xian's attack suddenly stopped. Ji Yinyang's 5 fingers were on the tip of the halberd. Rumble! The divine light of creation blotted out the sky and covered the earth, and the power to shatter the heavens bloomed to the extreme. At this moment, Ji Yinyang's face no longer had a charming smile. Instead, it was filled with an extremely cold expression, as if he was staring at Yi Xian like a venomous snake. Clang! Ji Yinyang was too terrifying. He was an entire realm higher than Yi Xian, and he had the primal chaos yin-yang battle body. When he erupted with his own terrifying might, he sent Yi Xian's heavenly execution halberd flying with a single palm. Yi Xian only felt a terrifying force surging towards him. His whole body was pushed back by the heaven-destroying halberd. "Little 9, you've really made me unhappy." Dong dong dong. Ji Yinyang's face was malicious. He walked slowly towards Yi Xian. Yin and Yang Qi rose under his feet. Although it did not materialize, the appearance of this strange phenomenon caused the heaven and earth to tremble. It was as if it was about to collapse. He was indeed powerful. Yi Xian stood with his halberd and squinted his eyes. Although he was disgusted by Ji Yinyang's posture, he had to admit that Ji Yinyang was really powerful. Yi Xian was sure that if he did not unleash his full cultivation, he would definitely not be Ji Yinyang's opponent. However, if he really showed his cultivation, he would definitely expose his identity. After all, he could only use a few techniques at the moment. This greatly limited his combat power. "Little 9, I'll give you one more chance. As long as you obey Fifth Brother will definitely not treat you unfairly. Otherwise, don't blame Fifth Brother for falling out with you today," Ji Yinyang said coldly. "Ji Yinyang, although you make me feel disgusted, your cultivation has indeed made me look at you in a new light. In fact, I really want to kill you." Yi Xian's lips curved into a sinister smile. No one knew what Yi Xian was thinking at the moment. He wanted to secretly use the 2 supreme powers, and erupt the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world. It would definitely be effective when Ji Yinyang was not alert. However, Yi Xian was not sure if he could kill Ji Yinyang. If his identity was exposed, it would definitely bring him great danger. Yi Xian was weighing the pros and cons. He was also considering whether to take the risk. Kid, don't be rash. This is the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. If you dare to use your supreme powers and the chaotic 12 Yuanhui world, I can guarantee that you will definitely be discovered. Gai Tianyuan's heavy voice came. Gai Tianyuan was not trying to scare Yi Xian. The 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace was a tiger's den, not to mention the Supreme Lord of 10,000 Spirit. Even those terrifying bigwigs would be able to detect Yi Xian's abnormality in an instant. Little Nine, you are very confident. So confident that you can defeat me. Could it be that after a trip to the southern Do Great region, you think that your cultivation has improved, and you can compete with me? Ji Yinyang said coldly. Today, fifth brother will let you see what the chaotic Yin-Yang combat body is. Rumble. Ji Yinyang's 5 fingers reached up to the sky, as if he was lifting the heavens and the earth. The exploding divine light of creation spiraled in the void, and turned into an extremely terrifying vortex. It released a destructive power that could destroy the world. Chapter 1201. Just you, Yi Xian said coldly. He believed that he was definitely not inferior to Ji Yinyang, but he could not use his true cultivation. This made his eyes gloomy, and he felt slightly aggrieved. However, he could only summon the Nirvana armor to fight against this person. You don't have to be in a hurry to kill him, but you can't put yourself in danger, Gai Tianyuan reminded coldly. Suppress! Ji Yinyang roared coldly, and his 5 fingers slammed down on Yi Xian. The terrifying whirlpool formed by the holy light of creation fell on Yi Xian, causing the heaven and earth to tremble. How dare you! Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was about to forcefully resist this attack, an ice-cold rebuke sounded out. Without waiting for Ji Yinyang's attack to land, his great technique exploded into bubbles. Ji Yinyang even took 3 steps back from this rebuke, and his entire body instantly turned serious as he looked towards the distant horizon. Qi. Light flowed in the heaven and earth. In the void, a purple figure quietly appeared in front of Yi Xian. No one saw how she appeared, but when this person appeared in front of everyone, the heaven and earth suddenly became silent, and was accompanied by the sound of cold air being sucked in. Purple spirit sage emissary? Tuobatian muttered in shock. The faces of the 3 spiritual sons instantly turned pale, and their bodies became stiff and uncontrollable. Not only the 3 spiritual sons, but even Ji Yinyang, who originally had a gloomy aura, had a slight change in expression. His own aura became extremely chaotic. Ji Yinyang had never expected that purple spirit sage emissary would block the attack for Yi Xian. Greetings, purple spirit sage emissary. Tuobatian, Xiao Yuan, and the rest hurriedly bowed to greet her, appearing extremely humble. Yinyang greets purple spirit sage emissary. Ji Yinyang's expression changed slightly, but he still bowed to purple spirit, because he could not afford to offend this woman. Moreover, he was not purple spirit's opponent at all. Ji Yinyang, how dare you? Purple spirit scolded coldly, and a cold aura erupted from her body. I don't know why the divine emissary is so angry. I don't know what's wrong with Yinyang. After being berated by Ziling, Ji Yinyang's heart was filled with anger, but he did not dare to show it. However, he was the 5th spiritual son, and his status was extremely noble. If he did not dare to speak up after being berated by Ziling, it would be too shameful. Bang! Suddenly, the laws of primal chaos went berserk. The space around Ji Yinyang exploded into a vacuum, and the purple light slapped him away. Wow! A mouthful of blood spurted out from Ji Yinyang's mouth as his body slammed heavily into the ground. It was just a casual strike from the purple spirit, but it had caused him to suffer such a heavy injury. Hiss! The sound of people sucking in cold breaths could be heard continuously. The expressions of the people watching from afar changed greatly. No one had thought that Ziling would be so ruthless. She didn't leave Ji Yinyang any face. You, Wow! Ji Yinyang scrambled to his feet and spat out another mouthful of blood. Ziling's attack was just too terrifying, and it was not something he could withstand. Ji Yinyang, if it weren't for the fact that you're the fifth spirit son, and a disciple that my 10,000 spirit heavenly palace has specially nurtured, I would definitely take your life today, Violet Spirit said coldly. Sacred Envoy, please calm down. Ji Yinyang was wrong. Ji Yinyang's chest was filled with extreme anger, but he did not dare to show it. Instead, he bowed to Ziling and lowered his posture to the extreme. This was because he could not afford to offend Ziling, whether it was in terms of status or cultivation. Moreover, he clearly knew that if he showed any signs of anger, Ziling might really kill him. Apologizing and bowing his head, this was the attitude that Ji Yinyang was showing. Although he did not know how he had offended Ziling, he did not need to know now. In front of a powerful expert, if the other party said that you were wrong, you were wrong. If he refuted, he would be courting death. The strong were as heavy as a mountain, while the weak were as crawling as dogs. This was the cruel reality. The ninth spirit son is my sworn brother. If anyone dares to make things difficult for him, then they are going against me. I don't care who your master is, and I don't care if you are a spirit son or not. If you dare to harm the ninth spirit son, then I will bury you with him. Ziling said coldly. She was not only saying this for Ji Yinyang, but also for everyone to hear. When her words fell, whether it was the crowd in the distance or Ji Yinyang's group, everyone's expression changed greatly. They quietly glanced at Yi Xian, fear in their eyes. What a good little ninth. No wonder he was so fearless. It turned out that he had found such a big backer. Ji Yinyang's expression did not change, but his heart was roaring with anger. An extreme feeling of grievance appeared in his heart. Apologize to my sworn brother now, then get out of here. Although Ziling was a woman, her way of doing things was extremely overbearing. She was not afraid of offending Ji Yinyang at all, nor would she leave him any face. Ninth brother, fifth brother was wrong. You are a great person, so don't lower yourself to my level. Ji Yinyang was indeed a character. Although he was a damn transvestite, he was also an ambitious and ruthless person. He strode over to Yi Xian and bowed, lowering his posture to an extremely low level. It's fine, Yi Xian said lightly. He did not make things difficult for Ji Yinyang, just because Ziling supported him, because that was not his style. Yi Xian was a person who disdained relying on someone else's prestige. This would make him look down on himself, but he also knew that Ji Yinyang hated him to death. But it didn't matter, because Yi Xian knew that sooner or later, he would personally kill Ji Yinyang. Saint Envoy, we will take our leave. Ji Yinyang bowed to Ziling, then turned around and left. But if one were to observe carefully, they would see that Ji Yinyang's fists were tightly clenched. Blue veins were squirming on the back of his hands, proving how angry he was. As Ji Yinyang and the others left, the crowd in the distance also gradually dispersed. But today's matter quickly spread. Almost everyone in the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace knew that ninth spirit son had found a great backer, and was even recognized as a sworn brother by Saint Envoy Ziling. Little brother. The frost on Ziling's face disappeared. She turned around and smiled at Yi Xian. Thank you, sister. Otherwise, I would have suffered a great loss today. Yi Xian pretended to sigh. Fortunately, I received the news of your return in advance, so I rushed over. But this Ji Yinyang is sinister. You have to be careful in the future. But don't worry, little brother. After today, no one will dare to go against you. If this Ji Yinyang continues to be dishonest, tell me. I will definitely teach him an unforgettable lesson. Ziling comforted. Thank you, sister. Let's talk in the palace. Yi Xian smiled and nodded, then invited Ziling into the ninth spirit palace. On the other side, in the fifth spirit palace, Ji Yinyang had just returned to the fifth spirit palace when he spat out another mouthful of blood. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Tuoba Tian beside him supported him. Otherwise, Ji Yinyang would have fallen to the ground. What a great Saint Envoy Ziling. If I don't take revenge, I won't be human. Ji Yinyang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and let out an extremely sinister roar. Fifth brother, forget it. We can't afford to offend Saint Envoy Ziling. Now that ninth brother has found such a great backer, let's not make things difficult for him in the future, Xia Wuyuan said cautiously. Trash, you are all trash. Ji Yinyang roared angrily. His voice was extremely sharp. Who does Ziling think she is? She is just a maidservant of the Heaven Master. Even if she is now at the extreme Yin realm, I will eventually surpass her. When I, Ji Yinyang, step into the Yin Yang realm, even if Ziling is the Heaven Master's maidservant, why should I be afraid of her? Ji Yinyang roared angrily. At this moment Ji Yinyang was extremely furious. This state lasted for dozens of breaths, before he gradually calmed down. But you are right. I can't afford to offend her now. Little ninth brother is even more fearless. However, it is easier to dodge an open spear than a hidden arrow. I don't believe that bitch Ziling will always stay by his side, Ji Yinyang said coldly. Chapter 1202. The Ninth Spiritual Palace. Yi Xian politely invited Violet Spirit to take the seat of honor, while he sat beside her. As for the four maids and coachman Lei Lan, he had already dismissed them, leaving only Yi Xian and Violet Spirit in the palace. Little brother, what do you think this is? Ziling flipped her hand, and a purple lotus platform appeared. It was blooming with a bright light. A ninth-grade purple lotus? Yi Xian's eyes lit up, and he blurted out the origin of this item. That's right, it's a ninth-grade purple lotus. This lotus is a primordial treasure. Sitting on it every day will greatly increase one's cultivation. This item was originally bestowed to me by the Heavenly Master. Now I'm giving it to you. I hope you can break through to the manifestation realm soon, Violet Spirit said with a smile. Thank you, sister. Yi Xian did not decline. How could he not want something good that was delivered to his doorstep? Moreover, this ninth-grade purple lotus was indeed an extremely rare item. Thus he accepted it. Little brother, although you're the ninth spirit's son, and appear to be extraordinarily noble to outsiders, you should know that your status is nothing in the 10,000 Spirit Palace. Only your own strength matters, Violet Spirit said. Little brother will remember sister's teachings, Yi Xian hurriedly replied. Seeing Yi Xian's humble appearance, Violet Spirit nodded. She knew that Yi Xian was indeed a promising talent. Actually, I didn't come here today just to meet you. I have something more important to tell you, Violet Spirit said with a solemn expression. Yi Xian was shocked. Although he had not known Violet Spirit for a long time, Yi Xian knew that Violet Spirit was an extremely arrogant person. Now that she was showing such a serious attitude, it must not be a small matter. What does sister want to tell me? Yi Xian's eyes moved as he asked. The Heavenly Master wants to see you. Boom. It was like a thunderclap in the primal chaos, like the stars and universe exploding. When Ziling's words fell into Yi Xian's ears, Yi Xian was completely stunned on the spot, and his expression instantly changed indeterminately. Not only was Yi Xian extremely shocked, even Gai Tianyuan, who was in his sea of consciousness, was incomparably shocked. It was all because this news was too explosive, and it really shocked the two of them quite a bit. Lord of all spirits, the strongest of the 10th Yuan Hui, Yi Xian was known as the unrivaled primal chaos character in the 10th Eon. This was also the goal that Yi Xian had always wanted to catch up to. Yi Xian had thought that he would meet the Lord of all spirits, but he hadn't expected it to be so soon, nor had he made any preparations. This was because before he came to the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, Gai Tianyuan had told him that the most powerful person of all time was a high and mighty existence. Even among the many important figures in the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, not many had the chance to meet the Lord of all spirits, let alone the spirit child that he had turned into. This was also the reason why Yi Xian dared to come to the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace so boldly. It was because the Lord of all spirits simply wouldn't notice a mere ninth spirit child. But now, Ziling had brought this news that simply shocked Yi Xian and Gai Tianyuan to the extreme. If he really went to meet the Lord of all spirits now, his identity would definitely be exposed. Seeing Yi Xian's expression change, Ziling only thought that Yi Xian was too nervous after hearing this news. After all, the 4 words Lord of all spirits were too heavy. And if it was anyone else, they wouldn't be able to remain calm after hearing this news. Little brother, don't be nervous. The Lord of Heaven wants to meet you only because of the primal Chaos Star Master's inheritance. When the time comes, just answer whatever the Lord of Heaven asks you. Ziling comforted gently. Yi Xian instantly woke up. He forcibly suppressed the fluctuations in his heart and said with a smile, I've made a fool of myself in front of elder sister. But I wonder when the Lord of Heaven will meet me? If you don't have anything else to do now, follow me to the 9th heaven. After all, the Lord of Heaven has ordered me to bring you to meet him when you return, said Ziling. Elder sister, please don't blame me. Little brother has just returned to the heavenly palace, and it can be said that he's travel-worn and hasn't dared to rest. Why don't you give little brother 7 days of fasting and bathing before meeting the Lord of Heaven? This way, I can also express my sincere respect for the Lord of Heaven. What do you think, elder sister? Yi Xian said reasonably. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Ziling slowly nodded. She didn't suspect Yi Xian at all. After all, meeting the Lord of all spirits was indeed a big matter, and no one would dare to slight it. All right, then I'll come pick you up in 7 days. With that, Ziling got up and walked out of the palace. Little brother, send elder sister out. Yi Xian let out a slight sigh of relief and hurriedly sent Ziling out. When he saw Ziling disappear from his sight, the smile on Yi Xian's face instantly disappeared, and his entire person became extremely gloomy. There's a big problem, Yi Xian muttered maliciously. That's impossible. Yiling Tian is high and mighty. Why would he want to meet a small spiritual son? Gai Tianyuan muttered to himself in shock, completely unable to understand the crux of the matter. You old thing, I trusted your words too much. Now there's a big problem. Yi Xian muttered to himself, in a self-deprecating manner. He knew that he had made an extremely grave mistake. Yi Xian had always thought that Gai Tianyuan, who had lived for a long time, and was experienced and knowledgeable, would definitely be able to solve many problems for him with him by his side. That was why he had hurriedly come to the heavenly palace of all spirits. But now, he finally realized that he had miscalculated and forgotten an extremely important matter. And this matter was the Lord of all spirits himself. Back then, when he had lied to Ziling, she had completely believed him. However, Ziling was the Lord of all spirits' maidservant. She had also come to the great southern Do region, under the Lord of all spirits' decree, to find the Chaos Star Master's inheritance. Although Yi Xian had lied to Ziling, and this little girl had been used by him, Ziling would definitely report her experiences in the great southern Do region to the Lord of all spirits. Who was the Lord of all spirits? To be able to become one of the strongest throughout history, his temperament and cultivation were definitely top-notch. Yi Xian could lie to Ziling, but he might not have believed the Lord of all spirits. If Yi Xian's guess was correct, the Lord of all spirits had already suspected him. He suspected that the Chaos Star Master's inheritance had been obtained by him, so he had personally summoned him. And Gai Tianyuan had always guaranteed that the Lord of all spirits would not pay attention to a small character like him. Yi Xian had always believed Gai Tianyuan's words, so he had boldly come to the heavenly palace of all spirits. But now, this oversight had suddenly become a serious problem, and most likely a fatal one. If Yi Xian went to meet the Lord of all spirits like this, he was certain that his identity would be exposed. With the Lord of all spirits' cultivation, he would be able to see through his true identity at a glance. This was tantamount to courting death. But if he did not meet the Lord of all spirits, and instead fled the heavenly palace of all spirits, the Lord of all spirits would be able to find him with just a thought. This was also courting death. What should he do? Yi Xian frowned, his heart heavy to the extreme. He could only blame himself for his carelessness, which had caused him to fall into a dilemma. But what made Yi Xian feel slightly relieved was that he still had 7 days to prepare. Moreover, the Lord of all spirits only suspected that he had the Chaos Star Master's inheritance, but did not suspect his identity. Gai Tianyuan, you and I are in the same boat now. If this boat capsizes, not only will I die, but you won't be able to live either. Hurry up and think of a solution, Yi Xian growled maliciously. Chapter 1203. Of course I'm thinking about it. Even without Yi Xian's reminder, Gai Tianyuan was even more anxious than Yi Xian. Countless ideas flashed through his mind, but they were all rejected by Gai Tianyuan. If he could find the profound cicada pill, and let Yi Xian swallow it, perhaps Yi Xian would be able to survive this calamity, and prevent the Lord of all Spirits from seeing through Yi Xian's true identity. But there were only 7 days left. Although he knew where the profound cicada pill was, he didn't have the time to retrieve it. Taking a step back, even if Yi Xian had the profound cicada pill, Gai Tianyuan couldn't guarantee that the Lord of all Spirits wouldn't be able to see through Yi Xian's true identity. This was a supreme expert of all ages. Gai Tianyuan didn't dare say he understood just how terrifying he was. If you can't think of a way, I have one. Suddenly, Yi Xian whispered coldly, causing Gai Tianyuan to suddenly wake up. He hurriedly asked anxiously, "What method?" At this moment, Yi Xian was pacing back and forth in the hall when he suddenly stopped, and a strange light flashed through his eyes. A fake is a fake after all. No matter how you try to hide it, it's still a fake. But what if it's the real thing? Yi Xian smiled strangely. Really? You mean? Gai Tianyuan asked in a daze, as if he had thought of something. I definitely can't go see the Lord of all Spirits, but Yao Yuye can because he's not a fake. Yi Xian said with certainty. You can't. Gai Tianyuan coldly denied. You should know that although Yao Yuye is real, if you let him see the Lord of all Spirits, he will definitely tell the truth. At that time, you and I will still be exposed. You're really stupid. With your methods, can't you think of a way to control this person? Yi Xian coldly rebuked. Gai Tianyuan suddenly realized that he had been too anxious. In his panic, he had forgotten the many secret techniques he was proficient in. I do have a secret technique that can control a person's soul. But you have to know that the Lord of all Spirits is too terrifying. I'm afraid that he'll still see through my secret technique. If that happens, we'll still be exposed. Gai Tianyuan was not confident. You really are a piece of trash. No wonder you lost to Yi Xian back then. Looks like I still have to rely on myself. Yi Xian scolded coldly. Now, he didn't want to waste his breath on Gai Tianyuan. Although Gai Tianyuan was knowledgeable, he was still too weak when it came to shrewdness. It seemed that he could only think of a way himself. Lei Lan. All of a sudden, Yi Xian's voice resounded outside the hall. Lei Lan strode into the hall and bowed respectfully to Yi Xian. May I know why Spirit Child has summoned me? Lei Lan was extremely respectful, and his entire person was humble and courteous. Hee. Yi Xian laughed, but his gaze was extremely gloomy, staring at Lei Lan from beginning to end. Lei Lan didn't even dare to raise his head. His heart was beating violently, and a feeling of unease was growing in his heart. You know that I'm not Yao Yi, right? Yi Xian said coldly. Boom. Lei Lan seemed to have been struck by lightning. He staggered backwards, but he still pretended to be at a loss. He looked at Yi Xian and said, Spirit Child, I don't know what you're talking about. No need to pretend. You can't fool my eyes. Yi Xian sneered and said, Those 4 stinking girls have already begun to suspect me. And you've been following Yao Yuyi all day long. How could you not see that I'm fake? After all, you're much more scheming than those 4 ugly girls. At this moment, Lei Lan was drenched in cold sweat. He kept retreating backwards, because it was just as Yi Xian said. He had already suspected that Yi Xian was fake, and he was even more certain of his own judgment. Lei Lan understood Yi Xian too well. A person's temperament could change, but it wouldn't change so quickly. From the time Yi Xian tyrannical to Obatian to Ji Yinyang, Lei Lan had already determined that Yi Xian was fake. But Lei Lan was very smart. He had never revealed it, because he knew that if he had any abnormalities, this fake spirit child would definitely take his life. Lei Lan's cultivation wasn't high, but he knew how to survive. He knew that only by pretending to be stupid could he live for a long time. Smart people often died very quickly. Still not admitting it? Yi Xian said sinisterly. Putong. Lei Lan's knees went soft, and he repeatedly kowtowed to Yi Xian. He said sorrowfully, Spare me, spare me. I don't care if you're the real spirit child, or the fake spirit child. I have no intention of harming you. Did I say I would kill you? Yi Xian said with a smile. He even helped Lei Lan up and affectionately swept his clothes. This made Lei Lan not dare to act rashly, but his back was already drenched in cold sweat. He was deeply afraid that Yi Xian would kill him in the next moment. I'm a very easy person to get along with. Although you found out that I'm fake, as long as you listen to me obediently, I will give you many benefits that you can't imagine. What Yao Yi can give you, I can give you. What he can't give you, I can give you even more. But if you dare to have any thoughts of betrayal, then don't blame me for beating you until your soul scatters. Yi Xian said with a smile. I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare. Lei Lan hurriedly replied in fear. Now, I'll ask you questions and you'll answer. If you answer well, I'll give you what you want. If you can't answer, then you'll die here today. Yi Xian said sinisterly. I will definitely tell you everything I know. I won't dare to hide anything. Lei Lan said in fear. Good. Yi Xian nodded in satisfaction and continued. Let me ask you, does Yao Yi have any family members in the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace? Yes, his parents are still alive. He also has a younger sister. He has placed her in the first layer of heaven. Lei Lan hurriedly replied, not daring to hide anything. Quickly tell me the details. Yi Xian's eyes lit up with excitement. Lei Lan didn't dare to delay. For the sake of his own life, he quickly explained Yao Yuye's situation. It turned out that Yao Yuye's parents and younger sister were cultivating in a heavenly paradise in the lower realm. However, their cultivation was extremely weak. Every few thousand years, Yao Yuyi would send many spiritual items for his family to cultivate. Other than Lei Lan, no one else knew about this. Even the four maids didn't know. Sometimes, when Yao Yuyi was in seclusion, he could only let Lei Lan go in his place. That was why Lei Lan knew that Yao Yuyi still had family members alive. Qi. Yi Xian pointed his finger, and a strand of nirvana energy entered Lei Lan's forehead. This caused Lei Lan to cry out in pain. He thought that Yi Xian wanted to silence him. However, in the next moment, Lei Lan discovered that he was still alive. This caused him to look at Yi Xian in fear. Nirvana energy, one of the 12 strongest powers. If you don't want to die, then do as I say. I want you to bring his parents and younger sister here within 3 days. If I don't see you return in 3 days, then you should know what will happen to you. Yi Xian coldly said. This lowly one knows. Lei Lan was truly a lowly person. He was extremely afraid of death. He turned into a ray of light and flew away. Clearly, time was of the essence. If he couldn't bring Yao Yuye's family back in 3 days, then he would definitely die. Yi Xian, you want to use Yao Yuye's family to threaten him? Will he really be threatened by you? Gai Tianyuan saw everything and asked Yi Xian in fear. Of course he will. Yi Xian coldly said. This Yao Yuyi told me a lot about his own situation, but he didn't tell me that he still had relatives in this world. This also means that he cares a lot about his relatives, and this is his weakness. Gai Tianyuan, you must remember that everyone has a weakness. There is no exception. This method may seem simple, but it is also the most practical method. It will definitely make Yao Yuyi obediently listen to you. Yi Xian cruelly sneered. What if he doesn't care about the lives of his family? Gai Tianyuan asked. Doesn't care? Yi Xian coldly muttered. A cruel smile appeared on his face. If he doesn't care, then I will personally cut off the flesh of his family members, right in front of him, until he cares. Following Yi Xian's words, even Gai Tianyuan felt his scalp go numb. You are truly despicable, shameless and vicious. Gai Tianyuan somewhat looked down on Yi Xian's method, and even mocked him. Despicable? Vicious and vicious? Yi Xian coldly said. Gai Tianyuan, do you know why you lost to the Lord of all Spirits? It is because when you were weak, you did not use everything you could. As the saying goes, those who achieve great things do not care about trifles. On the path to becoming the strongest throughout history, your path will be paved with bones. This so-called despicable and shameless method is also a method to make yourself stronger. You must remember that the winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. History is always written by the winner. The world will only remember his success, and not his dirty methods. This is the cruel reality. Yi Xian coldly said. You? Gai Tianyuan wanted to refute, but he didn't know how to refute. In the end, he could only remain silent. However, Yi Xian's words had truly shaken him to the core. There was even a trace of bitterness in the depths of his heart. That's right. If he had Yi Xian's unscrupulous way of doing things back then, he probably wouldn't have fallen to such a state today. Chapter 1204. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. It had to be said that under the threat of death, Lei Lan's speed was indeed astonishing. Yao Yui's parents and little sister had already been brought to Yi Xian. Let me go, you bastard, let me go. A woman with picturesque features and a pretty face was currently being bound by the immortal binding rope. She loudly scolded Lei Lan. Beside the woman was a middle-aged couple. The two of them were very calm and did not quarrel like the woman, but their faces were a little panicked. Lingzi, I've brought them here. Lei Lan pushed the three of them towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's back was facing them, and he did not say a word. Only when Yi Xian slowly turned around did he look at the three of them. Brother, he bullied me. When the woman saw Yi Xian, she seemed to have found her backbone. She ran to Yi Xian and complained with an aggrieved look. You come back. He's not your brother. Suddenly, the middle-aged woman's expression changed, and she called out to the woman with a trembling voice. Mother, what nonsense are you talking about? He's obviously my brother. The woman looked at her mother in shock. Your mother is right. I'm indeed not your brother. Yi Xian smiled strangely and gently pushed the woman away from him. Only then did he look at Yao Yui's parents. Who are you? What did you do to our son? The middle-aged man coldly scolded and looked at Yi Xian angrily. Tsk. I've always heard that a mother and son's heart are connected. It seems that it's true. With just a glance, you can tell that I'm a fake. Yi Xian sighed. Ah, you're really not my brother? Hu Yuer's face paled and she staggered back. She looked at Yi Xian in horror. What did you do to my son? The middle-aged woman bit her lips and asked. Don't be afraid. Your son is still alive and well. I'll let you see him soon. As long as he listens to me obediently, I won't hurt you. Yi Xian said lightly. Wang. Yi Xian waved his hand and a gourd appeared. When he opened the gourd, a puff of smoke came out and Yao Yui appeared in front of Yi Xian. Brother Yi, let me go. I beg you, let me go. Yao Yuyi had just escaped and did not have time to see who was present. Instead, he hurriedly knelt and begged Yi Xian in grief. Because he had been imprisoned in the gourd, this kind of dark life was driving him crazy. Brother Yao, what are you doing? Please get up. Yi Xian hurriedly helped Yao Yuyi up from the ground and affectionately helped him tidy up his wrinkled clothes, as if the two of them were best friends. Year. Suddenly, the middle-aged woman's choked voice rang out. When Yao Yuya heard the extremely familiar voice, he immediately froze as if he had been struck by lightning. However, Yao Yuya did not turn around because he knew that he absolutely could not respond. He knew who was behind him. Brother Yao, look how good I am to you. I especially helped you bring your parents and little sister here to reunite with you, Yi Xian said with a smile. Brother Yi, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Who are they? Yao Yuya pretended to be puzzled. Only then did he turn around to look at his parents and little sister. However, his expression did not change, as if he really did not know the three of them. Oh! Yi Xian pretended to be surprised and said, So Brother Yao does not know them? Then they can all go die. In the next moment, Yi Xian's smile disappeared and his face darkened. His 5 fingers suddenly stretched out and sucked the 3 of them in front of him. It was as if he was going to crush them in the next moment. No! Yao Yuye roared in shock and hurriedly stood in front of the 3 of them. However, his expression was extremely ferocious, and his eyes had turned blood red as he glared at Yi Xian. Brother Demon, what are you doing? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a cruel smile. Yi Xian, what do you want? Just say it. Yao Yuye knew that he could not hide it. Although he did not know what was going on, Yi Xian was able to find his family. The other party must have a great purpose. Brother Yao is indeed straightforward. Then I will be frank. Yi Xian did not want to continue talking nonsense. He directly stated his purpose, which made Yao Yui's expression change unpredictably. You want me to meet the Lord of all spirits? Are you not afraid that I will reveal your secret? Yao Yui said angrily. I was afraid before but not now. Yi Xian smiled, and a fishing net appeared in his hand. His expression was strange and gloomy as he said, But I wonder if Brother Yao has heard of a kind of torture? What do you mean? Looking at the ordinary fishing net in Yi Xian's hand, Yao Yuye did not know what Yi Xian was trying to do. In the mortal world, there is a kind of torture. This kind of torture is inhumane. It is called fish scale dismemberment. It means that a fishing net is placed on a person's body. Then, along the gaps in the fishing net, the person's flesh is cut off bit by bit. Over 1,800 cuts will be made before the person bleeds to death. Yi Xian explained happily. His face showed an intoxicated expression, as if he had really done it before. However, when Yao Yuya heard Yi Xian's explanation, he staggered back. His face became extremely pale, and he almost collapsed to the ground. You. Yao Yuya's body and mind trembled, and he could not speak. Although Yi Xian did not say it clearly, he knew very well that if he did not listen to Yi Xian, the fish-scale dismemberment would fall on his family. Okay, I promise you. Yao Yuya roared with hatred. He really had no choice. He could not bear to let his family suffer such torture. That's right. As long as you are obedient, I will not harm you. Even your family will be safe. Yi Xian smiled and put away the fishing net. However, Gai Tianyuan saw this scene with his own eyes, and felt ashamed of his inferiority towards Yi Xian's methods. Lei Lan, bring Brother Yao's family to the back of the palace. If anything happens, you know the consequences. Yi Xian said coldly. Yes, Lingzi. Lei Lan was indeed a vile person. He didn't even look at Yao Yuya, and directly pushed the three of them towards the back of the palace. Yao Yuya's little sister was crying nonstop, constantly begging Yao Yuya for help. This made Yao Yuya even more anxious. Brother Yi, please do not implicate my family in the grudge between us. I can help you meet the Lord of all spirits, but I hope you can let them go after this. Yao Yuya begged bitterly. Brother Yao, don't worry. As long as you help me with this matter, nothing will happen to your family. Yi Xian said with a smile. Okay, I hope you will keep your promise. Yao Yuya clenched his fists and said. The following matters became simple. Yi Xian began to warn Yao Yuya. After all, he had to be careful when meeting the Lord of all spirits. There could not be any mistakes. Chapter 1205. Gai Tianyuan. I've taken care of everything, but there's still something I need you to do. Yi Xian's voice sounded in Gai Tianyuan's ears. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Gai Tianyuan was startled. You've already done what you need to do. What else do you need me to help you with? I want to spy on the conversation between the Lord of all spirits and Yao Yuya. I also want to see what kind of person the Lord of all spirits is, Yi Xian said solemnly. This? Gai Tianyuan's voice was hesitant, but he understood what Yi Xian was thinking. After all, the most powerful person in history was only a legend, and this was no small matter. If Yao Yuya was really up to something, Yi Xian would know immediately. Do you have any ideas? Sensing Gai Tianyuan's silence, Yi Xian said somewhat anxiously. The most powerful person in history is invincible in the primal chaos. No secret technique will be effective before him, but it's not impossible. As long as you hang a mystic light mirror on Yao Yuya's body, and inscribe it with primal chaos star runes, even the most powerful person in history won't be able to sense you spying on him, Gai Tianyuan said solemnly. The so-called primal chaos star runes were the runes cultivated by primal chaos star masters. Only primal chaos star masters could conceal the mystic light mirror and allow Yi Xian to spy on the Lord of all spirits. That's a good idea. Yi Xian instantly understood what Gai Tianyuan was thinking. Primal Chaos Star Masters were almost comparable to the most powerful person in history. Although Yi Xian didn't cultivate the astral origin art, his avatar had always been cultivating in the southern Do region. Inscribing the Primal Chaos Star runes wasn't difficult for Yi Xian. Yi Xian did as he said, because he didn't have much time left. Soon, he carefully inscribed the primal chaos star runes on the mystic light mirror and hung it on Yao Yui's waist. No one would be able to see anything strange about it. When all this was done, the deadline of 7 days approached. Yi Xian secretly let out a sigh of relief. He had arranged everything at the last moment. On the 7th day, Violet Spirit came to the 9th Spirit Hall once again. However, this time, Yi Xian was already hidden in the back hall. The real Yao Yuyi had already followed Violet Spirit out of the 9th Spirit Hall and headed towards the 9th heaven, where the Lord of all spirits resided. Above the clouds was the clouds of all spirits. Violet Spirit led the way in front, while Yao Yuya followed closely behind. However, the two of them walked together. Yao Yuya rarely spoke, and Violet Spirit felt that something was wrong with Yao Yuya. But she couldn't tell what it was. Am I to's answer his? S to answer to's Aza. S to answer to's answer he asks answer. S remember? I'll remember. Yao Yuya hurriedly nodded, but there was a deep bitterness in his eyes. At this moment, he was Yi Xian's puppet and didn't dare to play any tricks. Unless he didn't care about the lives of his loved ones and wanted to die together with Yi Xian. Soon, the two stepped onto the Rainbow Bridge and entered the 9th heaven. There was an eternal heavenly palace in the middle of the sky. It was the Lord of all spirits' dojo. It was boundlessly majestic and spanned across the heavens and earth. Chaotic light swirled around the palace, and the laws of the heavens and earth were born in the void. Just looking at it from afar made one's heart tremble. On the other side, Yi Xian saw everything through the mystic light mirror. Even though he was separated by the mystic light mirror, he could still feel a boundless pressure that set off waves in his heart. The most powerful dojo of all times, surrounded by the laws of primal chaos, is indeed terrifying, Yi Xian sighed. At this moment, Purple Spirit and Yao Yuya had already arrived in front of the 10,000 Spirit Palace. The door opened and the two entered in reverence. Rumble! The heavens and earth spun and the void twisted. When Purple Spirit and Yao Yuya entered the 10,000 Spirit Palace, they instantly turned into rays of light and disappeared. Even Yi Xian, who was watching through the mystic light mirror, felt dizzy. This is the primal chaos teleportation technique. It can allow people to enter a different dimension, Gai Tianyuan explained. Dong dong dong. At this moment, Yi Xian could feel his heart beating violently. Through the mystic light mirror, he could see Purple Spirit and Yi Yaoyue appear in an ancient palace. There was an illusory figure sitting in the depths of the palace. Yi Lingtian. When this figure appeared, Yi Xian felt as if he couldn't open his eyes. Gai Tianyuan's low roar also sounded out at the right time, proving how excited he was. Purple Spirit greets the Heavenly Master. Disciple Yao Yuya kowtows to the Heavenly Master. Inside the mystic light mirror, Purple Spirit knelt down while Yao Yuya kowtowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. You are Yao Yuya? The Lord of all spirits figure was illusory. He didn't ask Yao Yuya to get up, but his voice alone caused Yao Yuya's soul to tremble. He immediately fell into a daze. Disciple is indeed Yao Yuya. Yao Yuya seemed to have lost his soul as he replied in a daze. Not good. When Yi Xian saw all this through the mystic light mirror, his face immediately darkened. He could see that Yao Yuya had completely fallen into a daze, as if he was being controlled by the Lord of all spirit. Don't worry, he is real after all. You and I are also talking about this. Don't panic. Gai Tianyuan interrupted gloomily. Yi Xian let out a breath of turbid air. His space-time power was already circulating. As soon as he felt that something was wrong, he would use his space-time power to escape. He was already prepared to summon the River of Time, to draw out that pair of ancient eyes, to stop the Lord of all spirit. Although Yi Xian believed that his plan was foolproof, he had to prepare for the worst. He had already found a way out for himself. After all, this was playing with fire. If he made a mistake, he would be burned to the point that not a single drop of him remained. Let me ask you, is the inheritance of the Chaos Star Master in your hands? The Lord of all spirits' voice echoed in the ancient palace. This was the voice of chaos, and the voice of the great Tao. No one could lie in front of him. Disciple did not obtain the inheritance of the Chaos Star Master, nor have I ever seen it. Yao Yueya said in a daze. What he said was the truth. Is it really not with this person? The Lord of all spirits stopped breathing and fell silent. He had originally guessed that the inheritance of the Chaos Star Master was with Yao Yueya, but he didn't think that he would be wrong. Of course, the Lord of all spirit didn't suspect anything, because no living being could lie under his voice. This was also why he believed Yao Yueya. It seems that the Chaos Star Master lineage is indeed extremely mysterious. It's not something that I can force. The Lord of all spirits sighed as the voice of chaos disappeared. Yao Yueya also instantly woke up, but he was already drenched in cold sweat. He remembered everything that had happened to him, but he couldn't help but answer the Lord of all spirits' question. At this moment, not only was Yao Yueya covered in cold sweat, but even Yi Xian and Gai Tianyuan were extremely nervous. The two of them were afraid that the Lord of all spirit would continue asking, or else Yi Xian would be involved. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.